Order, please. We'll begin with the daily routine, presenting and reading petitions, presenting reports of committees, tabling reports, regulations, and other papers, statements by ministers, government notices of motion. The Honourable Minister for Economic Development and Climate Change.
Thank you.
Environment and Climate Change. Sorry, it is Friday.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, permission to make an introduction.
Yes, by all means,
Thank
please.
you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the West Gallery, I'd like to acknowledge the late Dr. Meinhard Duell's family in the gallery today. Joining us are Dr. Duell's wife. They're not here
Order,
yet?
please.
Okay.
Order, please.
Okay. Maybe we'll get the honourable member to Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Sure, you can do that when they're in the gallery. The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day, I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Mi'kmaq have generational knowledge of the lakes and rivers in Nova Scotia, derived from centuries of interaction, observation, and adaptation to the natural environment. Whereas the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture recognizes the importance of knowledge sharing and relationship building between fishing guides and the Mi'kmaq knowledge holders. And whereas the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture has worked with Elnua Affairs, the Nova Scotia Guide Service, and Mi'kmaq knowledge keepers and elders to advance understanding and awareness of the Mi'kmaq culture and traditions, promote treaty education, and learn about complete concepts of Mi'kmaq connections to the land and the natural world. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly recognize the members of our sport fishing community, in particular the leaders who represent Nova Scotia as sport fishing guides, for taking part in the second annual Indigenous Learning Day for Guides and Anglers, to be held November 20th at the DeBert Hospitality Centre. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for a waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favour of the motion please indicate aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, permission to make an introduction.
Permission granted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take this moment to acknowledge the late Dr. Meinhard Duell's family in the gallery with us here today. Joining us are Dr. Duell's wife, Wendy Jardine, and daughters Alida and Nicola. His daughter Clara is watching online from Ottawa. And also in the gallery, Mr. Speaker, are some friends of the family. On behalf of my colleagues here in the legislature, I'd like to welcome them to Province House and extend our sincere condolences to the family and friends. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Dr. Meinhard Duell had a passion for learning, teaching, and the environment, and believed there were solutions for even the most complex issues. And whereas Meinhard's environmental leadership and his contributions to environmental law, academia, and sustainable living has improved the quality of our environment and the lives of all Nova Scotians. And whereas, while Meinhard's contributions to the development of environmental policy are too many to name, it is notable that he contributed to the creation of Nova Scotia's Environment Act, provided a wealth of experience in environmental assessment, and informed and co-authored a guiding document related to Nova Scotia's aquaculture regulatory framework. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this legislature offer their deepest condolences to the family of Dr. Meinhard Duell and participate in a moment of silence for a life well lived in the service of Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. It is agreed. Would all those in favour of the motion please indicate aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. We'll stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. Please be seated. Introduction of bills. The Honourable Member for Sydney, Member 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just want to recognize my friend Danielle Boutlier from Cape Breton, who's not here today, but she's watching, and it's her 43rd birthday, and she's the reason why I'm doing this. And, Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 197 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Health Services and Insurance Act, respecting breast reconstruction coverage for breast cancer survivors.
The Honourable Member for Sydney, Member 2, begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 197 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Health Services and Insurance Act respecting breast reconstruction coverage for breast cancer survivors.
Bill 254, an act to amend Chapter 197 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Health Services and Insurance Act, respecting breast reconstruction coverage for breast cancer survivors.
Order that the bill be read a second time on a future day. Notices of motion. Statements by members. The Honourable Member for Argyll.
Much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Veterans Week from November 5th to 11th is an opportunity to honor the extraordinary efforts and sacrifices of our veterans. Remembrance Day, November 11th, the final day of Veterans Week, marks the anniversary of the official end of the First World War. It is a time to honor and remember those who have served and continue to serve during times of war, conflict, and peace. Mr. Speaker, we owe it to our veterans to speak about them, to share their stories, to honor their sacrifices, and to keep their memories alive. Throughout this coming week, Mr. Speaker, I encourage all Nova Scotians to honor our veterans, to wear a poppy, and on Remembrance Day, go to a local cenotaph to pay your respect. Lest we forget. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Clayton Park West.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to recognize Adigoke Fedare for his role in the Association of Nigerians in Nova Scotia's Summer Barbecue. It is an outdoor experience that brings together Nigerians and their families from across Nova Scotia. The barbecue event took place at Tremont Park in Clayton Park West. People came to this family event from Cape Breton, Truro, Wolfville, and other areas. They had live band performances, comedy, and game activities for the whole family. This year, 2022, saw the biggest number of attendees with close to 2,000 people. This wonderful outdoor event allowed people to connect and network while celebrating with music, dance, games, and wonderful food. The barbecue event was free for all attendees and funded by the generous contribution of sponsors from the Nigerian business community and a few MLAs through advertising. I would ask that the House join me in recognizing Mr. Fedare for his contribution to the Association of Nigerians in the Summer Barbecue, and I look forward to next year's event. Thank you, Fedare.
The Honourable Member for Halifax-Shabukto.
Thank you. I wish to recognize the recipient of the first R. Gordon Murray KC Award from the Nova Scotia Legal Aid Commission, Roger Burrell. The Gordon Murray Award is presented in recognition of the impact a recipient has on the legal aid movement and recognizes an individual who, in the words of the award citation, is deemed to have added to the quality of legal aid as an evolving pillar of justice and fairness. The award was presented on September 22nd at the annual meeting of Nova Scotia Legal Aid. The inaugural Gordon Murray Award honors Roger as Commission Counsel with the Mass Casualty Commission. It pays tribute to his lifelong
Order,
commitment.
please. I believe the member's mic was off there. So if you want to start it over again, I'm sorry, your mic was not on until right now. The Honourable Member for Halifax-Shabukto.
Yeah, I just understand, Mr. Speaker, it's acceptable if I start again?
Yes.
Thank you. Because I do wish to recognize the recipient of the very first R. Gordon Murray KC Award from the Nova Scotia Legal Aid Commission, Roger Burrell. The Gordon Murray Award is presented in recognition of the impact a recipient has on the legal aid movement, and it recognizes an individual who, in the words of the award citation, is deemed to have added to the quality of legal aid as an evolving pillar of justice and fairness, unquote. The award was presented September 22nd at the annual meeting of Nova Scotia Legal Aid. This first Gordon Murray Award honors Roger's retirement following 35 years as a legal aid lawyer in Halifax, as well as his recent nearly 2 years as Commission Counsel with the Mass Casualty Commission. It pays tribute to his lifelong commitment to providing diligent and thorough counsel to those he has represented, and I ask the House to join me and the Legal Aid Commission in recognizing the contributions of my brother.
The honourable member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this year marks the 100th anniversary of 4-H. The program was founded in Nova Scotia in 1922 and spread across Canada in the following years. The 4-H's stand for Head, Heart, Hands, and Health, and their belief is that you learn to do by doing. 4-H provides agricultural awareness to youth between the ages of 9 and 21 in a fun, safe, and inclusive environment. It sets the youth of today on the path to success by providing leadership and life skills. 4-H programs take a combination of both keen and diligent volunteers as well as youth and family commitment to be successful. In other words, it's a huge undertaking and take many people to make it happen. I had the opportunity to meet local 4-H members during our Hants County exhibition last month, and I appreciate their projects and livestock firsthand. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to recognize and commend the 7 4-H clubs of Hants County, Avon, Burlington Workers, Border Riders, Cobequid, Rawdon, and Newport, and thank the individuals involved with one of the best programs in place for our youth. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Northside Westbound.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to recognize and send best wishes to the May Cabuc Green and Gold Hockey Tournament in North Sydney. It's happening this weekend, started yesterday, and the 4 local Cape Breton teams will be participating, as well as a couple of teams from the mainland, I think Dartmouth and JL Islay. So I just wanted to wish the Memorial Marauders the best of luck. I know they had a tough loss last night, but 2 games today, bounce back, and best of luck, and I hope you all have a great time and play fair and have fun. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to acknowledge a phenomenal woman, Sylvia Paris-Drummond. Sylvia is the CEO of the Delmore Buddy Day Learning Institute. Her work in education and the community is rooted in core Afrocentric principles. Sylvia has a successful history of collaborating with communities and stakeholders and has been known to get things done in a thoughtful, respectful, and engaging way. I could list the many attributes and accolades of Miss Sylvia, but she probably wouldn't want me to go on. I will say that Miss Sylvia is an amazing person, community member, and most of all, a well-respected leader and mentor in our African Nova Scotian community. And I would like all members of this House to join me in celebrating an educational leader in our African Nova Scotian community, Mrs. Sylvia Paris-Drummond. Thank you.
The honourable member for Shelburne.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to acknowledge our seafood workforce across the province, and today in particular to recognize our hard-working commercial lobster fishermen and women and their families who are preparing to begin their season in a few weeks. Mr. Speaker, in Shelburne County, 1 in 3 jobs are in the seafood industry, and provincial exports were worth $2.4 billion in 2021. This industry is not only the backbone of our local economy, but it also contributes significant tax dollars, jobs, and product to support the economy of our province and our country. Mr. Speaker, I respectfully ask all members of this House join me in recognizing all workers in the seafood sector and wishing our local lobster fishermen and women a safe and prosperous upcoming season. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Clare.
Excuse me. Mr. Speaker, this June, Brother Walter Como was admitted into the Compagnie des Associés Francophones, an organization that recognizes Canadians who have volunteered their time for the promotion of French and Francophone communities. Brother Walter, originally from Grosscock, joined the St. Croix congregation in 1972, and during his life has been involved in many activities which promoted the growth and development of Acadian and Francophone communities. This often included traveling across Canada and beyond to organize gatherings where Acadians and Francophones could meet and learn about each other. I ask that all members join me to congratulate Brother Walter for this honor in recognition of his contribution to the development and spread of the French language and Acadian cultures in his community and across the world. Merci.
The honourable member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to recognize the 10th anniversary of the Delmore Buddy Day Learning Institute, or DBDLI. This institute is named after community leader Delmore Buddy Day, who is also manager and sergeant at arms at Province House. Over the past 10 years, DBDLI has built a network of educators, learners, and community members, all dedicated to ensuring that the learning experience of the African, Nova Scotian, and Black communities is optimized across the lifespan. They work across the province, engaging youth and community members alike. The Institute has produced a range of books and texts celebrating the African Nova Scotian experience, from books for young children, such as the ABCs of North Preston, to a Black history text and teacher's resource. The DBDLI team is also developing, leading, and sharing research on Afrocentric curriculum and approaches, and are renowned for their community-based approach to engagement, learning, and research. Mr. Speaker, I ask all members of this House to join me in congratulating the Delmore Buddy Day Learning Institute on a successful first decade.
The honourable member for Lunenburg West.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize Cheryl Corcoran and her husband Keith, who are fierce advocates for individuals living with cystic fibrosis, a fatal genetic disease that causes severe damage to the lungs, digestive system, and other organs of the body. Cheryl has cystic fibrosis. Since 2007, she has helped raise $91,000 for research for a cure for this disease. In 2011, her commitment to the fight against cystic fibrosis earned her the Adult with CF Award, now known as the CF Warrior Award, through the Atlantic region of Cystic Fibrosis Canada. In 2019, Cheryl and Keith were co-winners of the Volunteer Fundraising Champion Award through the same organization. Cheryl has also spent many years as the Atlantic Regional Rep and Vice Regional Rep for the Adult Cystic Fibrosis Committee. I ask the members of this House of Assembly to please join me in thanking Cheryl and Keith Corcoran for their commitment and support of those affected by cystic fibrosis and to supporting the work to find a cure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Bedford South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, during this Lebanese Heritage Month, I want to recognize Saj House, an amazing Lebanese-owned business that will be opening in West Bedford very, very soon. An institution in Fairview Clayton Park for nearly 2 decades, and I know the member for Fairview Clayton Park is sad that they're no longer in her area, but they can come visit. We in the Bedford area are so lucky that Saj House is coming to our neighborhood. Saj House specializes in the savory Middle Eastern flatbread called manouche, along with so many other delicious Lebanese and Mediterranean dishes. I had the chance a few weeks ago to meet with the owner, Bassel Al-Jamil, wonderful young guy, entrepreneur in our area, and I'd ask all members of the House to congratulate Bassel and his team and visit Saj House when they open their doors soon. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre, Whitney Pier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to wish happy birthday to several young people who are very important to me. In May, we celebrated Jacob McNeil's 7th birthday and Callum Leahy's 1st birthday. In July, we celebrated my daughter Rory Brown's 3rd birthday, as well as the birth of my daughter Isla. In September, we celebrated my brother Adam's birthday, and in October, we celebrated Mason McNeil's 1st birthday. And today, we celebrate Chloe McNeil on her 6th birthday, Mr. Speaker. I love you all. I love them all, and I cannot wait for my hugs when I get home and to celebrate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I would like to recognize Wayne Reynolds, who passed away in August at the age of 72. Wayne grew up in Point Tupper and worked for the former Store Forest Industries. In his spare time, Wayne participated in the Under the Map Theatre Company for many years and was a very active volunteer with the 519 Store Air Cadet Squadron. The Royal Canadian Legion Branch 43 was also benefited from Wayne's talents, as he was a dedicated member for more than 40 years. Wayne was a founding member of the Port Hawkesbury Judo Club more than 50 years ago. As a second-degree black belt, he mentored and trained many students. He was a fierce competitor and a well-respected manager in the sport. In 2021, he was inducted into Port Hawkesbury Sports Wall of Fame for his contributions to the sport. Please join me in offering condolences to the family of Wayne Reynolds. He will be missed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since 2008, the Taste of Nova Scotia Awards has celebrated the very best of Nova Scotian culinary producers, developers, exporters, and servers. I was pleased to learn that Funday Gin from Still Fire Distilleries in Lakeele was named Product of the Year at the 2022 awards. This award recognizes a Taste of Nova Scotia member product that embodies the essence of Nova Scotia. It's memorable, unique, and proudly local. The gin is triple distilled. It passes over Bay of Fundy beach stone and is flavored using 8 carefully chosen botanicals, including locally hand-picked dulse, creating a truly authentic maritime taste. Mr. Speaker, I invite all members of the House of Assembly to join me in congratulating Owen Ritchie, Andrew Cameron, and the entire Still Fire Distillery team on receiving this recent award. Thank you.
The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to celebrate poet Sue Goyette on the occasion of the launch of her new book, Monoculture. Monoculture is an incredibly inventive and beautiful collection of writing which presents as comments left by visitors on the website of the last old-growth forest left in Nova Scotia, known in the book as the Nova Scotia Forest. It is published by Gasborough Press from Kemptville. The visitor comments are moving, rude, grateful, very funny, and honest, and the collision of the contemporary idea of online comment sections with the ancient and wise forest is profound. At the launch of the book, which took place last night at the Bus Stop Theatre, audience members were given the chance to play the part of the forest and read excerpts of the book from cards. I was amazed how each excerpt was brought to life by a stranger, reading the words for the first time, and how collectively all of the readings gave a wondrous sense of the magnitude, beauty, and importance of our trees and the need to protect them. That is the power of poetry and art. And I ask all the members of this House to join me in congratulating Sue Goyette on this great accomplishment and thank her for her commitment to writing and sharing her profound work with us.
The honourable member for Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to bring much-deserved recognition to Leah Place, Women's Resource Centre in Sheet Harbour. Leah Place provides services and programs for women and girls to respond to emerging issues, and they've been a huge support to my constituency office. The staff at Leah Place work diligently to provide safe refuge and confidential support for women and girls through counseling, crisis intervention, social advocacy, and accompaniment through the social service, justice, and healthcare systems. They deliver programs based on the need identified by the communities that they serve, such as life skills, personal development, healthy relationships, and sexual violence prevention and intervention. Through education and outreach, Leah Place Women's Resource Centre works hard to address policy gaps and barriers to women and adolescent girls living on the Eastern Shore and part of the Musquodoboit Valley. I ask that all members of the Assembly join me in thanking Leah Place staff for their much-needed expertise and ongoing initiatives to support women on the Eastern Shore. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to recognize the Reverend Margaret Sagar of Terrence Bay. Margaret is a force to be reckoned with. She cares passionately about her community, Canada, and the world at large. Margaret is an activist who lobbies for peace in the world and sustainability of the planet. She has a deep passion for preserving our beautiful coastlines, pristine wilderness, and unique biodiversity for everyone. She devotes great energy and enthusiasm to ensure development does not negatively impact these areas. On a local level, Margaret has been an active volunteer with the SS Atlantic Heritage Park and Museum in Terrence Bay for many years, honoring the memory of those lost in the tragic sinking of the SS Atlantic, recognizing the heroism and telling the stories of local fishers and their families who risked their life to save the victims in an important part of our local history Margaret loves to share. Margaret is currently chairing a committee to host the 150th anniversary of the sinking of the SS Atlantic, an ambitious project to host the descendants of those connected to the disaster for a period of 10 to 14 days in the summer of 2023, a project of reflection, remembrance, and celebration of our Irish heritage. I'd like the members of the House of Assembly to join me in thanking Margaret for her energy and devotion to our community and the planet. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize a new black business in Halifax Needham, the Braiding Lounge, and owner Tara Taylor. The Braiding Lounge aims to share the natural hair love on Godigan Street. Owner Tara Taylor wants people to rediscover the beauty that is connected to natural hair. The hair studio will offer various natural services such as henna dye, extensions, micro-locks, dreads, twists and locks, cornrows, silk presses, and cuts. Tara says we want black folks to get back to what God gave them, to celebrate curls and tresses and still celebrate just being beautiful. Hair has always been a passion for Tara Taylor, who was born and raised in East Preston. She started doing her own hair at 11 years old, quickly discovering a love for styling. Tara draws her inspiration from Miss Viola Desmond, who had her hair and beauty studio on Godigan Street in 1937, right across the street from where the Braiding Lounge is located, to honor Miss Viola's memory and legacy. I would like all members of this House to join me in celebrating Tara Taylor's success with the Braiding Lounge in Halifax, Needham.
The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to give a report from a wonderful event that I had the pleasure of attending in June. The Anglican Parish of French Village Mothers Union brought the community together again after 2 years for a white-gloved tea party in honor of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth's Platinum Jubilee. They raised more than $1,000 benefiting Primates World Relief and Development Fund and supporting the purchase of an accessible van for a local community member. Thank you to the volunteers and contributors to this successful event and to Reverend Brianna Andrews. With a level head and a humongous heart, she is always there for her parishioners, community, myself, and anyone in need. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Sydney, member 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we all know, our constituency assistants, we really couldn't do our jobs without them. I do want to recognize, because she loves being recognized in public all the time, not really, but Janice Way has been with me as my constituency assistant for since I began, and she was with the previous MLA and some of the other elected representatives in the community before me. So she's helped thousands and thousands of people through the calls every day that come into the office, through some pretty heavy weather events, and always does it with love and support for everybody that calls the office. So I rise my place to recognize Janice Way for not only the work that she does for the constituents of Sydney member 2 every day, but what she has done for thousands of families across the island over her career.
The honourable member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to share an event happening in Halifax Citadel, Sable Island this afternoon. Today, November 4th, 2022, is the second annual David Gasp Memorial Walk, organized by the Dalhousie Department of Family Medicine. As you may recall, David was my father-in-law. He was a dedicated father, partner, and grandparent. He was also an amazing and renowned family doctor, clinician educator, and was dedicated to primary health education and reform. He also loved to walk on the Barrens and Lower Prospect, the beach at Cape Tormentine, and to work and to do chores in Halifax. This memorial event brings together his family and communities to celebrate his love of walking for health and for community. Mr. Speaker, I invite all members to join us in Point Pleasant Park this afternoon, and I extend my thanks to the Dalhousie Family Medicine Group for organizing this special act of remembrance.
The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate this year's recipients of the Sackville Business Association's Annual Business Awards. Each year, the Sackville Business Association accepts community nominations for their annual business awards. From the 875 nominations received this year, Supreme Auto Service received the Best New Business Award, Brian's Barber was awarded the Best Customer Service Award, and Payzant Building Supplies was named the Business of the Year. The awards were presented by local musician and songwriter Joel Plaskett at the Sackville Business Awards breakfast held on October 21st, 2022 at the Rock Church in Lower Sackville. Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask that all members of the House of Assembly join me in congratulating this year's recipients of the Sackville Business Awards and wish them continued success. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Yarmouth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to pay homage to Pat Stay, who was a battle rap king. He hailed from the dark side of the harbour here in Nova Scotia, but took over King of the Dot and the whole North American scene. He was a national champion, a global icon, because his words bit like the sting of a... He was a... Let me start again, Mr. Speaker. Can I start again?
Go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I rise to pay homage to Pat Stay, who was a battle rap king. He hailed from the dark side of the harbour here in Nova Scotia, but took over King of the Dot and the whole North American scene. He was a national champ, a global icon, because his words bit like the prick of a bumblebee sting, and his rhymes and style smooth as silk, and his wit was as quick as a hummingbird's wings. He was an incredible artist with no peer on the roster, a presence so large nobody could even try to imposter. He grabbed life by the horns and built his own world like an author, and the best part of the plot being he became an incredible father. Mr. Speaker, people are mad right now. They want Pat back so bad right now. Many will still be sad right now because they know they'll miss the moments that they'll never have right now. So I ask this House to join me in extending condolences to his family, friends, and fans for this tremendous loss, and recognize the legacy of Pat Stay as an artist, a father, and the sucker-free boss. Thank you so much.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre, Whitney Peer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to recognize the issue of food insecurity. According to Feed Nova Scotia, 37,000 Nova Scotians accessed their supports. 4,807 individuals were from Cape Breton. 2/3 of food insecure households are reliant on income from employment. 47% of adults who report not following drug prescriptions because the costs are too high and they are too food insecure. These numbers are unacceptable. Food insecurity is a symptom of poverty, unemployment, and a broken system. Food banks are not long-term solutions to food insecurity, only bold policy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Eastern Passage.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to bring recognition to Kayla Bernard for bringing the HEART program to South Woodside Elementary School here in the constituency of Eastern Passage. The program's registration is open to students from grades 5 and 6 over lunch, and the school anticipates opening registration to include students from grade 4 as well. Kayla's focus is art and mindfulness, encouraging mental wellness through art. The children learn to express themselves through many art forms while creating basic coping skills through non-competitive art. I ask all members of the Nova Scotia Legislature to join me in recognizing Kayla Bernard for her dedication and compassion for the wellness of not only the students of South Woodside Elementary, but for all Nova Scotians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Bedford Basin. Halifax, Bedford Basin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to rise in my place today to actually thank the Bedford Basin Liberal Association for the support they've given me in this past election and ongoing, and also the previous riding associations with whom I was connected, the Bedford Liberal Association and the Bedford Birch Cove Liberal Association. I've had the great good honour of serving this House. This is my 4th term, and I've always had wonderful support from my riding associations. The volunteers come out at election time and in between, and I have to say that often I don't think we take it for granted here, but sometimes we don't get the chance to say thank you to the volunteers and the riding associations that serve us. So I just do want to say thank you to these folks. A lot of them have been with me through all 4 terms, all 4 elections, and I just want to say thank you to those associations. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to congratulate Ryan Gould and the Member 2 Men's Society for everything they do for their community. Last month, the Member 2 Men's Society was awarded the Charitable Committee or Organization of the Year at the Cape Breton Regional Chamber of Commerce Excellent in Business Awards. Ryan founded the society to help men who had been struggling with the way he had struggled. Ryan is very open about his sobriety and overcoming his addiction several years ago, and he understands that men needed a safe place to talk in the community. As well as being the president of Member 2 Men's Society, Ryan is the father of 6 beautiful daughters with his partner Samantha Smith. He's also a journeyman plumber with his own business and is the apprenticeship coordinator for the Mi'kmaq Economic Benefits Office in Member 2. Ryan also serves on the board of directors of the Breton Ability Center, and as member of the PC Party Diverse Communities Committee. In September, Ryan was a panelist at the Voices of Hope to draw attention to men's mental health on World Suicide Prevention Day. Mr. Speaker, I ask that members of the legislature to join me in congratulating Ryan and the Member 2 Men's Society for receiving the Charitable Committee of the Year award. It is very much deserved. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax Atlantic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to commend Keegan Williams for his heroic efforts on July 7th at Kidston Lake. Keegan is a 19-year-old young man attending Dalhousie University and has worked as a lifeguard at Kidston Lake for over 3 summers. On July 7th, he was on duty as captain lifeguard along with assistant captain lifeguard. Shortly after the end of his shift, both Keegan and his colleagues noticed a young boy who had been on a floater board, had gone out beyond the buoys and was no longer on his float. Both lifeguards felt uneasy, and Keegan dove into the water and swam out to the boy. When he reached him, he realized that the young boy was having difficulty keeping his head above water. Keegan threw him a lifeguard tube and pulled him to safety. The young boy said that he thought he could touch bottom, but did not realize there was a drop-off. If it was not for Keegan's quick reaction, the situation could have ended very badly. Mr. Speaker, I ask the members of the House to join me in congratulating Keegan for his quick actions that saved the life of a young boy that day. Keegan was able to assess the situation and react quickly in order to bring the boy to safety. Keegan and all the lifeguards that protect our beaches and lakes should be commended for their dedication, their training that allow people to enjoy our wonderful beaches, knowing that they are under the watchful eye of well-trained lifeguards like Keegan. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Mr. Speaker, there isn't a single person who lives in the public housing community of Demetrius Lane in Dartmouth North who doesn't know the name Josephine Downey. Josephine is a revered community member and leader within Demetrius Lane and has been called the matriarch of the tight-knit community. She was a founding member and former president of Demetrius Lane Tenants Association. The Demetrius Lane Tenants Association has run a food bank, community garden, library, and provides programming to residents. They've held community cleanups and barbecues, school supplies and backpack giveaways, holiday parties, and haunted houses. Josephine may have stepped down as the president of the Tenants Association a few years back, a position now held by the also amazing Amanda Crawley, but she is still a fierce advocate for and protector of her beloved community. I ask the House to join me in thanking Josephine Downey for all she has done for the residents of Demetrius Lane.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to make an introduction, if I could.
Please do.
Mr. Speaker, we've had the privilege of having many municipal councillors visit our legislature this week, and I'd like to draw attention to the chamber above me, the gallery above me, where we have another fine councillor from Kings County, my friend Tim Harding, does a great job for his constituents, the people he represents on the municipal level, and he's a great family man and volunteer in our community. So please welcome Councillor Tim Harding.
We welcome all guests to the legislature and hope you enjoy your time here. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very honored to rise today to recognize 4 great volunteer firefighters from my constituency: Captain Bryce Carey, Volunteer Chief Sean Carey, First Deputy Chief Owen Collins, and Mark Robinson, who in September were, with 37 others, received the prestigious civilian honor, the Decoration for Bravery, in a ceremony put on by Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Mary Simon, Governor-General of Canada. It was part of a program recognizing the 50th anniversary of that award. They were awarded for acts of bravery from 2015. On April 26, 2015, members of the Aylesford Fire Department rescued an elderly couple from a car submerged in the Annapolis River in Aylesford. The driver, stricken by illness, had swerved off the highway and into the river. Arriving on the scene, Sean and Mark grabbed the fire truck's winch cable and swam toward the vehicle. Mark used an axe to cut a hole in the windshield and with Bryce's assistance connected the winch to the vehicle. Sean pulled the passenger onto the roof of the car and Mark brought her to shore. Turning his attention to the driver, Mark dove several more times to free the victim's foot and from where it was pinned to the brake pedal, while Bryce and Owen held the driver's head above the rushing water. They worked together to remove the victim from the car window and brought him to shore. Sadly, though, the driver did not survive. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask you and all the members of this House to join me in congratulating Bryce, Sean, Owen, and Mark for receiving this well-deserved award for their tremendous acts of bravery and their willingness to put their lives on the line for their fellow man. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize the work of Miss Margaret Fraser, founder of the Boys and Girls Club of Preston, which has been in operation since 1996. Their mission is to provide a safe, supportive place where children and youth can experience new opportunities, overcome barriers, and build positive relationships and develop confidence and the skills required for life. And I can certainly attest that this is true, as all three of my children, AJ, Angelina, and Adre, attended the daycare. An after-school program. And so now I also want to congratulate Charnel Colley, who is the new executive director of the Boys and Girls Club. I look forward to working with you and being a support in your community as you have been to us. So congratulations.
The honourable member for Cumberland North.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to recognize Fire Chief Tom Flynn of the Wallace Fire Department. Tom has a great team with him, and his leadership is what helps make this group so special. Tom has been with the Wallace Fire Department for 31 years. The Wallace Fire Department stayed open during Hurricane Fiona aftermath from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. For almost 2 weeks, so that local residents could have access to power and water. This was a crucial service for those living in this rural community who were without power for some up to 14 days. I'm thankful for Tom Flynn and for all of the team at the Wallace Fire Department, as they truly care about the people that they serve in the Wallace, Malagash, and Pugwash area. This was a great encouragement to those who were without power during this time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize an up-and-coming baseball player from Dartmouth East, Ty Doucette. Ty has played baseball his whole life, with his mom being his first coach. Over his athletic career, he has developed an extraordinary skill level. According to the Prep Baseball Report for High School Baseball Scouting, Ty is listed as one of the top 500 prospects. With this ranking, Ty has the potential to enter the MLB draft. He's well on his way to becoming the next Canadian baseball star. Ty is a prospect committed to Oregon State University, where he'll continue to train, compete, and improve his skills. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the residents of Dartmouth East, I wish Ty all the best as he continues to follow his dreams on the field. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Fairview Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, today I would like to recognize a hardworking volunteer in Fairview Clayton Park, David Alders. Dave has spent the last 2.5 years dedicated to ensuring the most vulnerable residents in our area have consistent and free access to food since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. Dave has championed the construction, installation, and management of 3 community food pantries and has forged partnerships with many like-minded local community groups to ensure continued success. Twice a month, Dave works with Square Roots Fairview Clayton Park to bring fresh fruits and vegetables to the local pantries, and he regularly stocks and monitors the pantries throughout the week. Part of his basement is now even dedicated storage for groceries he purchases when he sees items on sale. Dave is also a dedicated volunteer leader with the Mainland North Joint Emergency Management Team. This team is trained by Halifax Regional Fire and Emergency and work year-round to help our community be ready for any emergency situation. The GEM team were very busy during the aftermath of Hurricane Fiona, sacrificing time with their families to ensure many other families were safe, warm, and connected when they needed services. Mr. Speaker, I ask all members of the House to join me in thanking Dave for his very important contributions to our community. Thank you.
The honourable member for Waverley Fall River Beaverbank.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on March 20th, 2019, Nova Scotia lost a young firefighter from Windsor Junction, Skylar Blackie, after an explosion during a training exercise in Waverley. Mr. Speaker, Skylar was a remarkable son, sibling, and husband, and a pillar of the community he grew up in. He also touched the lives of those in Truro, where he worked. Skylar is one of 5 men from Nova Scotia who will have their names engraved on a memorial in Ottawa that honors firefighters who lost their lives in the line of duty. Mr. Speaker, I ask we take a moment to remember the life and accomplishments of this local hero. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax Armdale.
Mr. Speaker, today I would like to recognize the Chocolate Lake Recreation Centre located in my constituency. The Recreation Center offers many sports and fitness programs for the communities, as well as major discount or free usage of low-income individuals. The center is partnered with the Down Syndrome Society and offers special arts programs and socialize for these struggling with disability. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Recreation for their hard work and dedication to the community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Cumberland North.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to draw attention to the wonderful work of volunteers throughout Cumberland County who organize Coats for Cumberland campaign. Each year, donations of gently used outdoor winter clothes are sought from around the county, and many local businesses offer to serve as drop-off locations. Thanks to the generosity of local residents, items are donated and then gathered and organized by the volunteers, and pickup stores are opened in various locations where those in need of warm clothes for themselves and their families can stop by. It's really quite a sight to see, Mr. Speaker. Hundreds and hundreds of winter coats and jackets. Jackets, coats, mittens, gloves, scarves, and hats are all made available and are very much appreciated by those who otherwise might face the winter ahead without warm gear to wear. Mr. Speaker, I want to recognize the many local residents who generously donate the items that they themselves no longer need, and also thank the volunteers who work diligently each year for Coats for Cumberland. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I'd like to rise to congratulate and applaud the Tri-County Women's Centre on their 20th anniversary. This spring, the Tri-County Women's Centre hosted a series of open houses throughout the month of May and June in Shelburne, Barrington, Yarmouth, and Digby. For 20 years, they have provided services and programs to women and girls in the Tri-County area. Their mission is to address public policy, to enhance the status of women, and to fulfill their mandates, direct services, and social change. Their services have empowered so many women and girls in the span of 20 years, but I know that they have so much more great work ahead of them. Congratulations to all the success of the Tri-County Women's Centre has achieved so far, and thank you for helping our women and girls grow stronger every day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker, and we're all very fortunate to have so many people support us to do the work that we do, and today I would like to thank my wonderful constituency assistant, Kathy Baker. She's been with me for, oh gosh.
Thick and thin.
Thick and thin, yes, but more than 5 years, not quite 10. I'm very grateful for the support that she provides the constituents of Hammonds Plains, Lucasville, and beyond. Some might have known her in a former role as Mama Duck when she was the #1 fan with the junior team in St. Margaret's, the Bay Ducks. And that Mama Duck mentality is really something that she has taken on very willingly and takes very personally. And she does so for so many people, not limited to the community of Hammonds Plains, Lucasville. Thank you, Kathy.
The honourable member for Kings North.
Speaker, I rise today to congratulate Kentville resident Katie Robinson on her time of 1 hour, 27 minutes, 39 seconds in the women's half marathon division of the Valley Harvest Marathon. The Valley Harvest Marathon celebrated its 30th anniversary this year with more than 2,500 participants. The Valley Harvest Marathon originally began in Kentville, but later moved to Wolfville, with all routes exploring the beautiful valley through the Wolfville and Port Williams area. The entire marathon begins and finishes at Raymond Field on the Acadia University campus. Please join me today to congratulate Katie Robinson of Kentville on her noteworthy finish in the women's half marathon and all runners and volunteers in this year's Valley Harvest Marathon. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Cole Harbour, Dartmouth.
Mr. Speaker, I'm honoured to stand and recognize Jacques Dussault. Jacques served in the Canadian Forces, RCAF, for more than 3 decades and continues to be an active member of the Nova Scotia UN NATO group. He has been a member of the Royal Canadian Legion for the past 35 years. He single-handedly collected and submitted hundreds of signatures through petitions to have a street named for a major collector in the Halifax Regional Municipality's urban core, to read Heroes Way. And in 2011, the commemorative name application was approved by Halifax Regional Council. And I think of Jacques often as I travel on the circumferential highway. Jacques continues to volunteer as a bilingual host and announcer for Sport and Entertainment Atlantic, volunteers with Habitat for Humanity, and is now a member of the Emergency Health Services as a medical transport service operator. Jacques Dussault, we recognize you for your continued dedication and service. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Pictou Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I am proud to stand today and share with this House of Assembly a dynamic duo of Sandy Anderson and Verna Elms. How lucky are we to lay claim to this couple of incredible women in Pictou Centre. Most days, if you are out and about the town of New Glasgow, you can see them out for their daily walk around the neighbourhood. If the weather is bad, they head to the mall because nothing stops these two from their exercise. Sandy and Verna are also members of the Second Baptist Church in Washington Street in New Glasgow, and let me say they are famous in our area for serving the best church suppers in the land. Their Easter brunches and their Christmas turkey dinners are truly not to be missed. Sandy and Verna are also two of the best advocates that our seniors in the area could ever hope for. When they are out on their walks and outings, they make sure they inform any senior they meet about government grants and assistance that may be available to them. We are forever grateful and proud to ask this legislature to join us today in thanking these wonderful women for their service and care provided to our community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Lunenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to bring recognition to LIFT Lunenburg County Microlending. A new venture, LIFT is designed to support Lunenburg County-based entrepreneurs wanting to start or grow a business by providing a low-interest microloan and complementary business coaching. At the intersection of philanthropy and community economic development, LIFT is entirely funded by those who want to give others a hand up and support a prosperous, vibrant, and diverse Lunenburg County. To date, they have already assisted 2 young female entrepreneurs with loans and support. Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the team at LIFT and commend them on their commitment to building and strengthening the business community in Nova Scotia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since 2003, people around the world have been turning November into Movember by growing mustaches to help raise awareness of men's health issues, such as prostate cancer, testicular cancer, and men's mental health and suicide. In Canada, 1 in 9 men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer in their lifetime. Testicular cancer continues to be the most diagnosed cancer in young men, and 3 in 4 suicides are amongst men as well. Movember is not just for men. Anyone can take part by raising funds and encouraging men to be proactive about their health. Mr. Speaker, I invite all members of the House of Assembly and all Nova Scotians to consider participating in Movember this year. Thank you.
The honourable member for Sackville-Uniacke.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I'd like to recognize Wanda White of Middle Sackville and her hockey team, the Zoomer Boomers, for representing Nova Scotia in the Canada 50-plus games held in Kamloops, BC this summer. The team consists of women over the age of 60, many of whom are teachers, nurses, including Wanda herself, who is a retired nurse. Wanda's love of hockey began during her childhood. Growing up in Fairview, she always had an interest in sport, so much so that she gathered 60 women and coaches to create the first women's hockey team in Fairview. Since then, she has used the sport as an outlet for recreation and enjoyment. Speaker, I'd like to once again congratulate Wanda and her team for representing our province on the national stage and wish them all the success in their future. Thank you, Speaker.
The honourable member for Clayton Park West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all CAs, but my CAs, and I've had some amazing CAs from Zaina Clamy to Charlotte Mose to Alexis Chamberlain, and now I have Linda Tweedy. I've had amazing women who have truly helped me to do my job, and I'm very thankful to have Linda at the moment, who's done an amazing job at my office. The number of calls and the issues that we're dealing with, I haven't dealt with in the last 4 years, and I couldn't have asked for a better CA than Linda, who is very experienced and is helping everybody and going out of her way, driving some constituents to safety sometimes. So I thank you, Linda, and I thank all the CAs I've had. I have been blessed. Thank you.
The honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I would like to acknowledge Terry Boudreau from Petit de Gras, who was named Richmond County's Volunteer of the Month for September. Terry began volunteering with the Straight Richmond Palliative Care Society after the death of her husband, Roy. For 17 years, Terry has dedicated her time as a member and has also served as chair. She promotes palliative care in the Straight area through volunteering, networking, advocacy, and education. Terry is passionate about everyone receiving the best palliative care possible. Terry is also a longtime volunteer with the Canadian Kidney Foundation, St. Joseph's Parish Council, and the Canadian Cancer Society. Please join me in congratulating Terry Boudreau for her hard work and dedication to her community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise again today to bring recognition to Brian Rollings for working with Musco Rider Cooperative for 10 years. Brian began working with Musco in November of 2012 when the first vehicle started providing public transit on the Eastern Shore. He was the first employee and often pitched in with dispatching as well as many other duties in the early days to keep the organization going. For a period of time, Brian worked without pay until additional funding was secured because he understood how important transportation is for those who have none. One of Brian's favorite sayings is "Drive to Arrive." It has been adopted as the Musco Riders' official motto. I ask all members of the Assembly to join me in congratulating Brian on celebrating 10 years of service and for his ongoing dedication to supporting the Musco Rider Cooperator. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate the Lewin-LaFrance sisters of Chester, who competed at the 49ers World Sailing Championship, which took place in Hubbards this summer. The sister team took home the highest placement for a Canadian in the competition, finishing in the 14th spot with a total score of 249.1 in the 49er FX class. Beginning to sail through the Chester Yacht Club in their youth, this duo is looking ahead to the 2024 Olympics. Mr. Speaker, I ask the host to join me in congratulating the sisters for their success and wishing them the best of luck in the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. The time for statements by members has expired. I recognize the honourable member for Eastern Passage on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce some wonderful residents from Eastern Passage. In the West Gallery, we have good friend of mine, Rhonda Vickers, as well as her neighbour, Danielle Fowler, and I ask all members of the legislature to welcome to the House of Assembly.
Again, we welcome all visitors to the legislature. Moving on to oral questions put to ministers by members. The time is 10 o'clock. We'll go until 10:50. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've seen over the last year the numbers on a needed doctor registry skyrocket by 45,000 more Nova Scotians. That number is up to over 116,000. We've not seen the numbers yet for this month. We wonder if those numbers are going to be higher. We've seen those folks that need a family doctor, those numbers skyrocket in Halifax by over 4,000% since the incentive for family practice in Halifax was taken away. And now we are seeing BC come up with a very new, lucrative, and appealing pay model for their family physicians. Does the Premier anticipate that this new pay model in BC is going to have an impact on our recruitment and retention efforts here in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Premier.
Thanks very much. Thank the member for this important question. Obviously, the compensation of our physicians, the compensation of our healthcare professionals, it's a competitive world out there, Mr. Speaker, but we know that our healthcare workers in Nova Scotia are dedicated to serving Nova Scotians. They've been through a lot. They're giving it a lot right now, and we're working hard to make sure that we support them and improve their working conditions. And we think Nova Scotia has a lot to offer them. And that's where our focus will continue to be, making sure we're supporting our healthcare workers, making sure we're offering them a quality of life in a wonderful province. And I think we can do a lot to support them. That's what we'll do.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on his first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we're talking to medical professionals and doctors, we are hearing that the situation in our hospitals is deteriorating. Working conditions are becoming more challenging as the labor shortage grows, as people are out with COVID and other respiratory illnesses, and as there's more pressure being put on that system. So we are hearing that people are already looking for exit ramps from our healthcare system in terms of work, Mr. Speaker, and we are concerned that this new pay model in BC, which is being deemed as a gold standard now in physician pay, might exacerbate these problems here in Nova Scotia. Does the Premier have a plan to ensure that that doesn't happen?
The Honourable Premier.
Yeah, I think under the leadership of the health leadership team and the minister, there's a lot that's been done in healthcare, Mr. Speaker. There's no question there's a lot more to be done, but every time I get a chance to speak to healthcare professionals, they recognize that this is a government that supports them. They recognize that this is a government that listens, and there's lots of pilot projects across the province that are happening. They're having good initial feedback on those. Those are ideas that came from healthcare professionals, that came from the front lines. We'll continue to listen to the healthcare professionals. We'll continue to work with them. We'll continue to make sure that they understand that this government is here to support them and always will be.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on his final supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. They need to be sorted with good public health policy. They need to be supported also with proper compensation. We have had a competitive compensation here in Nova Scotia until BC's new framework. We did have the highest paid emergency docs in Atlantic Canada. The alternative payment plan was very successful at recruitment, but now there's a new card being played by a bigger, more prosperous province, and we're wondering if the Premier's got a specific strategy to tackle that issue and ensure that we're not going to lose potential doctors that we could have recruited and lose doctors that are actually serving in Nova Scotia now. Thank you.
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you. We're obviously aware of what's happening nationally on different compensation packages. We have a good relationship with Doctors Nova Scotia. We'll continue to work with them. We'll continue to listen to frontline healthcare professionals, and I think we have a lot to offer in this province, Mr. Speaker. I wouldn't sell this province short on any scale, certainly not on quality of life, and we'll continue to work with those healthcare professionals and make sure that we're sharing the message that they'll be supported by this government, and they're responding to that, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Premier. Last Sunday, a 78-year-old man in Halifax suffered a fall in Point Pleasant Park. His wife, Donna McGuinness, explained to us that he waited immobile on the asphalt, exposed to the hazard of traffic passing by, shivering with muscle spasms and in pain from 4 to 6:30 p.m. before an ambulance came to take him away on a stretcher. Despite being less than 4 kilometers from an emergency department, it was discovered when paramedics arrived 2.5 hours later that they had come from Milford in East Hants. Mr. Speaker, why has the Premier allowed our EHS system to deteriorate?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, those are certainly heartbreaking stories, and unfortunately, there's a few of them, and there continues to be a few of them. But I want to assure the member and all Nova Scotians that we're working hard to improve the EHS system. That's why we've hired 180 transport drivers, and the number of transports that are happening in the province that no longer require a fully trained paramedic. That number's down by 3/4. So that frees up paramedics to make calls. We know there's a lot of work to do, Mr. Speaker. We'll continue to do that, but those stories are certainly heartbreaking for sure.
The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party on her first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But like doctors, we also just need more paramedics. Earlier this year, a representative from the province's paramedics union told media that, quote, our paramedics are some of the most highly skilled and trained in North America, and yet they are some of the lowest paid. It's easy to see why we're bleeding paramedics to other professions and other jurisdictions, and I'll table that. The Minister of Health and Wellness told this House that both recruiting and retaining paramedics is critical to reducing ambulance wait times. My question for the Premier is, can he see that Nova Scotia will continue to lose paramedics to other provinces unless they are adequately compensated and supported by this government?
The Honourable Premier.
Certainly compensation is part of the equation, Mr. Speaker. There are other parts to the equation as well. That's why we've taken a number of steps around the licensing of paramedics to get them working quicker. That's why we've taken some policy changes to make the drop-offs at emergency rooms quicker and more efficient. And the transport system, I can't stress enough what an improvement that has been. And paramedics have reached out to me. And they're not always shy to give their frank feedback, but they're reaching out to me and saying these steps are helping, Mr. Speaker. It will take time. These steps are part of it. Compensation is part of it. There's a lot of parts of the equation, and we're focused on every single part of the equation, Mr. Speaker.
The Leader of the New Democratic Party on their final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the numbers don't lie. Ambulance response times have gotten longer and longer, despite the direct-to-transfer system instituted this spring. The average offload times are climbing as well. Whatever this government is doing is not working. Mr. Speaker, this government ran on an election promise to fix health care. When will we see the results?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, look, it's very easy to get impatient. There's no question about that. But I ask Nova Scotians to trust the people working in the front lines of healthcare who are bending over backwards to fix a system, to fix the foundations of a system that has been very, very broken. We have to fix those foundations, and then we can build up from there, Mr. Speaker. It will take time. I've always been clear with Nova Scotians on that. I wish it was faster. There's a lot of work to be done, and to say that things that are taking place aren't working is disrespectful to our healthcare professionals who are actually driving that change, Mr. Speaker. I support those healthcare professionals. I know it's easy to get impatient, but there's work to be done, and we're doing it, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Fairview Clayton Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, daycare operators are telling us that their parent reduction fees are being withheld for this month. This accounts for 25% of their yearly budget, and without the next installment of this grant, make no mistake, operators will have to close. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister of Education is why is her department not giving operators this month's parent reduction fee?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the member opposite for the question. So I want to be very clear. Operators are receiving their parent reduction fees, absolutely 100%. All of the funding that was flowing to operators to support the 25% fee reduction for parents is continuing to flow to operators. So if the member opposite is in touch with an individual operator who's having any challenges with this, I encourage her to reach out to me or the department, and we can support that.
The Honourable Member for Fairview Clayton Park.
So, Mr. Speaker, we know that operators are struggling, and they've been told that their parent fee reduction grant will be withheld unless they sign a new deal by November 14th. So many operators are now having to face an impossible decision and have told me directly that they feel that they are being coerced into signing a new deal. Mr. Speaker, my question for the minister is simple. Will she immediately release the parent fee reductions to operators that they rightfully deserve?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Mr. Speaker, so I will answer that question again. The funding for the parent fee reductions has flowed to operators, as it has done so since we implemented the 25% fee reduction. If there's a particular operator that has questions, I do encourage the member opposite to reach out to me or to the department. It's probably a more constructive way to work that through than in the 45 seconds we have to answer questions on this. But I do want to assure Nova Scotians and the members opposite and communities that all of the improvements that we're making in childcare are fully funded up front for the operators so that they are supported to implement the 25% fee reduction. So parents have hundreds of dollars in their bank accounts now that they didn't before. We are also funding in advance the costs associated with the ECE wage increases, so that those increases are also...
Mr. Speaker, this question is for the Minister of Health and Wellness. The emergency center at the Annapolis Community Health Centre operated for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for years. Recently, Nova Scotia Health closed our emergency center. They've opened a urgent treatment center, but it's only open 3 days a week from 9 to 5 with no overnight model. Can the Minister of Health and Wellness tell me if there are plans to increase the hours of the UTC, both in terms of adding more days and overnight hours? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for the question. So we do continue to work in the community around recruitment, and it is important that we have consistent hours for the urgent treatment centre. We're also making sure that patients who attend the urgent treatment centre have a feedback form that they fill out following their experience there in order for us to better tailor experiences for the community to that centre. So the work is ongoing around recruitment, and we do want to open more hours for the community. Yeah.
The Honourable Member for Annapolis.
response. Good to hear that we're taking feedback as well. Given that the new model offers fewer services and is open for significant fewer hours, I think it's 168 hours at one point, it's down to 24 hours a week, it seems possible that this change may result in cost savings for the government. Can the minister tell me if this cost saving was a motivating factor for the decision to transition to a UTC model, and if this change will result in fewer healthcare dollars being allocated to the Annapolis Royal area? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
My response will probably make every progressive conservative in the province cringe, but money's not an issue, is what I would say. We have committed to invest in healthcare. We're very concerned as well about the HHR issues that we're facing, so this is certainly not an effort to save money at all.
The Honourable Member for Clayton Park West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Community Services. My office is receiving an enormous amount of calls. I honestly have been an MLA for 5 years, and there's more in the last year than in the whole 4 years. And I have actually an email from a constituent, and she is part of the team at St. Benedict Parish Church who are helping people who are homeless. So I'll table this because I'm going to quote what happened in this case. This is about a 55-year-old single female who was facing immediate homelessness, and I quote, "I'm sorry." They called to help her, and what they received from the department is, "I'm sorry, but right now we are not only offering help to people with children. We do not have anything for single women or single men.
Question, please.
We were offering tents, but we've run out of them." What does the
Minister of
minister
Community
think
Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member. This is extremely important. I'm disappointed to hear that's what was said. I would like to have a copy of if this was put in writing. Certainly, the member knows that I have worked with her on other individuals, and we certainly do our best. I would like to find out what exactly happened in this case, and I'm certainly willing to meet right after question period and get this solved. That's not right. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Clayton Park West.
I thank the minister. I honestly want to highlight the severity and the number of people who are arriving at our office. These are not people on income assistance. These are middle-class people who are homeless. And I already brought her another issue this week. But my question to her today, what are we doing? The homeless people, the cold is coming. Winter is here. What plans do you have for those people, please?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you. And we certainly know that those that are experiencing homelessness are experiencing the situation for different reasons. It could be poverty, but the member is correct. There's a number of individuals that we consider are, hardworking Nova Scotians and finding themselves losing their home during these difficult, challenging times. So what I would suggest is certainly calling our office. We will do our very best in finding them supportive housing and temporary shelter or hotels. This government did make an investment of $17 million in our last budget to deal with this situation, and there are more investments coming.
Dartmouth North.
My question is for the Premier. At a meeting of the Public Accounts Committee in April of this year, an official from Nova Scotia Health stated that the average virtual care Nova Scotia wait time was 31 minutes. By August, this time had grown to 110 minutes. Now, some Nova Scotians report logging on every day to find appointments fully booked. For these people, wait times are now measured in days and weeks if they can get an appointment at all. Nova Scotians still don't have access to the primary care that was promised by this government. When will Nova Scotians get the care they need?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member opposite for the question. So we continue to look at recruitment. I know that Virtual Care Nova Scotia, as an example, continues to onboard physicians and nurse practitioners in order to help. It actually is a sign that people are finding a very convenient way to access care, particularly for episodic complaints. We continue to work with the Office of Healthcare Professional Recruitments to look at what are the opportunities, as well as looking at immigration as a source to bring in internationally educated physicians. So we understand that this is going to take time. We are working very, very quickly in order to bring in the appropriate number of healthcare professionals.
The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you to the Minister for that answer. Mr. Speaker, Virtual Care Nova Scotia is delivered through Maple, a for-profit corporation that offers telehealth for a fee. When Nova Scotians are turned away from virtual care, they find they're still able to access Maple's services, but at a cost of $49 for a visit. Last week we relayed stories, or 2 weeks ago we relayed stories of Nova Scotians traveling out of province to find needed health care. And now this. It's becoming clear that care is available, but only if you pay. Mr. Speaker, can the Premier answer, is a two-tiered healthcare system this government's vision for the future of health in this province?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
So we do have a contract with Maple as a private-public partnership, but the folks that we employ are Nova Scotia Health employees, and we certainly don't, I can't speak to the private portion of that company. We continue to look at how we can publicly fund and onboard healthcare professionals that are funded fully by government in order to support people with primary care in the province.
The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been hearing from more and more ECEs in my constituency about their frustration with the rollout of the new childcare agreement. I have a letter written by 6 hardworking ECEs that I will table. The women of East Preston Daycare Centre have combined experience of over 150 years in their field. However, they are still not even being paid a living wage. The government continues to overlook some of the most valued, needed, and experienced early childcare educators. Mr. Speaker, can the Minister of Education let us know why ECEs with 20 and 30 years experience are not receiving a living wage?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for the question. So this is a sector, as we've said many, many times, and we've heard from the sector, that has been neglected for decades. They have been underfunded, they have not been given the attention or the money that they deserve. So to deal with this issue, we have inherited an agreement, and we are implementing on that agreement, and we have provided an additional $100 million a year to increase the wages of our ECEs. So for most ECEs, that means a 30% increase in pay. Most ECEs are getting 14 to 43% increase in pay. This is a significant investment that professionalizes compensation for the sector. Is this the end of the road? Absolutely not. This is the first step. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Preston.
I thank the Minister for the response. It's significant but not enough as we continue to hear concerns. The ECEs at East Preston Daycare Centre have spent their entire lives dedicated to their work. They've trained countless new ECEs and go above and beyond and have for years. These folks that have sacrificed their personal time and their personal funds at most, giving children the education and care they deserve, require more. The system has failed them. If the great ECEs are finally getting the raise, which we hear so much about, that is long deserved, Mr. Speaker, can the Minister please explain why the cap is set at 5 years and why our longest serving ECEs, most dedicated, are not a priority?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for the question. So we've heard the members opposite say not enough, and I have to emphasize, absolutely. The commitment that our prior government made to doing this work was not enough, which is why our government kicked in an additional $40 million to make these wage increases. But also, Mr. Speaker, this compensation package that we've rolled out is not the end of the story. So we did a number of other things, and we'll be doing a number of other things as well. First, Mr. Speaker, we knew that just flowing the funds at the end of this year, which the prior government committed to, was not enough. So that's why we made these increases retroactive. In addition to that, we will be coming in next year with benefits, including retirement benefits, Mr. Speaker, because these folks deserve compensation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Health. My constituent Barry McCauley was admitted to the ICU in the U.S. with acute renal failure. Thankfully, Barry had insurance to cover him. However, he faced significant challenges accessing care when he came home from the U.S. It was weeks before he was able to get any follow-up care in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, Barry is now waiting for vital surgery, Hallett prostate surgery, that he cannot get access to. Can the Minister of Health explain why this surgery is not available to him in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for the question. I'm not familiar with this person's individual case, and I'm not actually familiar with that procedure. So I think it would be something I would have to speak to after to better understand what the issue is. Yeah.
The Honourable Member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. More broadly on this issue, we want to make sure that patients are getting communicated to on timelines for when their surgery is going to be done. My office has been told that they are working through a lengthy procurement process with ISD. The surgeon is actually available to do the surgery, but they don't have the equipment. This surgery was supposed to be available back in the spring, I'm told. Can the minister commit to a timeline for Barrie when this important life-saving procedure will be done?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for the question. So I can't commit to a timeline because I'm not really clear about the procedures. So I'm not sure if there's a supply chain issue. I'm not really sure about the procurement. It's something that we're certainly happy to look into. Yeah.
The Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask the Minister of Education about access to early French immersion programs in my community. For several years, I've been advocating and working with the HRCE and local families from the Millwood family of schools, that's residents from Indigo Shores, Lucasville, Waterstone, and Kingswood North, about access to early immersion in that family of schools. And now we're seeing new programs roll out in neighboring communities. So I'm wondering if the Minister of Education can weigh in on when the Millwood family of schools may get access to early immersion.
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the member opposite for the question. So we know that introduction of French and the support of the French language and French education is a valuable and important part of our school system. We also know that that the regions and schools tailor their programming to meet local community needs. And so when a school decides or a region decides what programs to offer in what locations, it's really all about demand and need and interest in the community. So. With respect to French programming, those are the factors that go into consideration of what programming is offered in individual schools. I'd be more than happy to talk to the member about the needs of his community and help him engage with the region to express that and look at what's possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Thank you to the Minister through you, Mr. Speaker, for that response. I do appreciate the how these things come together, but it is concerning, certainly for me and for my constituents, and I don't begrudge any community for getting French immersion, let's be clear about that, but when a new school comes into the mix and a school community that has been asking for this for several years is looked over, and in the past we've heard rationale around the shortage of teachers, in particular French immersion teachers. So it's a little concerning. It raises a question of why the Millwood family schools would not be accepting a French immersion program coming into the next school year when the neighboring community is getting it.
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for the question. So again, it really comes down to questions around community interest and the volume of enrollment and desires and availability of resources. So I can't speak to the particular issue, but I'd be more than happy to speak to the member following question period. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Earlier this week, the Minister tabled a report that repeated an idea that we've heard before from this government. I'll quote, helping Nova Scotians move from renting to owning their first home also assists with making affordable housing available, and I'll table that. Everyone knows that without a rent control system, landlords will raise the rent of a vacant unit to whatever the market will bear. So, Mr. Speaker, when will this government admit that the way to create affordable housing is to build, protect, and support affordable housing?
The Honourable Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for the question, and I will pick out one part of that. I'm very proud that we've increased the down payment assistance plan for new homeowners. We are working to enable new homeowners. We increased the limits on the program. We're working on that in terms of renters, and some of the questions the member is asking may be more specific to my colleague in Service Nova Scotia, but we're working across the housing spectrum, Mr. Speaker. We recognize the housing crisis in Nova Scotia is urgent, is unprecedented. There's no one solution. There's many. We're working in many facets of this, and we want to see every Nova Scotia have a safe, affordable place to live. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the minister for that answer there. Mr. Speaker, I would like to address another housing myth that we've heard this government repeat. There is no definition of what constitutes affordable housing. We've heard the minister say the real definition is that there's a spectrum. For some people, it needs to be deeply affordable. For others, it needs to be somewhat affordable, and I'll table that. In fact, the CMHC and Statistics Canada both agree there is a definition. Rents must not exceed 30% of a person's before tax income. So, Mr. Speaker, will the minister admit that there is, in fact, a clear definition of affordable housing, but that he just doesn't want to build housing that applies to them?
The Honourable Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing.
So thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I've said, we're working across the spectrum from deeply affordable housing with things like Akuma, Souls Harbour, and with our partners with the federal government, to, and in fact, earlier this week, we made an announcement from a decision to increase by $5.3 million the budget for the homeowners rehabilitation program. So that's a program that helps primarily seniors, not exclusively, but stay in their own homes. So this is an income-tested program, and it primarily used for keeping helping people with roofs and furnaces and home repairs when they can't afford that. So this is, and that's for homeowners, people who own their own homes. That program's been in place for many, many years. The previous government supported it very well too. So we're working across the housing spectrum.
The Honourable Member for Bedford Basin.
Months ago, I was contacted by a constituent concerned about the health care, or lack of it, that she received earlier this year. Erin McDonald is 42 years old. In April, she suffered a stroke and went to the infirmary. And there she was seen by a resident, but not the attending neurologist who was on site. She was sent home and told she would be contacted for follow-up. But no follow-up came. So after a couple of weeks, she reached out to discover her follow-up appointments for tests were scheduled for months out at the end of June and July. And the result was Ms. McDonald suffered a second stroke less than 1 month after the first. Mr. Speaker, this is an all too common occurrence for women. Their concerns are routinely minimized or dismissed, and it's worse for African, Nova Scotian, Indigenous, immigrant, and low-income women. Mr. Speaker, does the Minister of Health think Ms. McDonald's treatment was acceptable?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, I'm not familiar with that particular case. I think there's a number of things. Number one, we want to provide timely access for not only treatment but also follow-up and investigations. I can't speak to that. If there is a concern about the care that the individual received, we should be reaching out to the College of Physicians and Surgeons if at any point that care is not what the person expected or was not following clinical guidelines. So I'm happy to speak to the member opposite afterwards to understand how we can better support that patient.
The Honourable Member for Bedford Basin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I did write to the Minister in early September to outline Ms. McDonald's case. I have not received an answer, and it's been nearly 2 months. Now, Ms. McDonald has since discovered her case was not flagged as urgent. She was unable to work following her strokes. She has a family to care for, and she wants to know what is being done to ensure stroke victims, particularly women, are treated in a timely and appropriate manner. Can the Minister please advise what is being done to ensure no other Nova Scotian is subjected to this lack of treatment again?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
So again, Mr. Speaker, we do want to make sure that Nova Scotians have the best care that they receive. Clinicians do have a number of guidelines that they need to follow, particularly in relation to stroke care, right from the time symptoms occur in terms of timely access to investigations as well as treatment. We also have a stroke program throughout the province where there is an expected rehabilitation program that should happen afterwards. So I will follow up. It could potentially not only be a system issue, but there may be an issue with a clinician, but I'll have to learn more about the case.
The Honourable Member for Sydney, Member 2.
Mr. Speaker, there's growing concern in the north end of Sydney about contamination that was discovered at the Imperial Oil Tank Farm, and the community is looking for more answers in the wake of last summer's leak. Mr. Speaker, since the spill's occurrence, residents say they've been attempting to get some straight and honest answers from Imperial representatives, only to walk away feeling angered and with a growing sense of mistrust, and even the latest provincial information on the additional hydrocarbon contamination finding left residents even more upset, and I'll table that. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister of the Environment, what is being done to ensure the residents of this community get the answers they are seeking and that they deserve?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the Honourable Member for the question. He's absolutely correct that the residents of North Sydney, the residents of Sydney Member 2, absolutely deserve clarity and openness. And rightly so, there's a lot of questions around that. And I want to assure residents of that community that as the regulator, I expect Imperial Oil to be open and transparent in their communications. We know from the investigation in July from the leak that historic contamination was discovered. From there, Mr. Speaker, the CSR, the contaminated site regulations, have been implemented, and I want to assure the honourable member under the contaminated site regulations will hold Imperial Oil accountable. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Sydney Member 2.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the Minister for the question. He's been engaged in this file. I appreciate his support, and I appreciate the support in the direction he's provided to the local folks on the ground with environment in Sydney. So as I said, the residents of the north end of Sydney they've been upset. They've been looking for answers. The additional historic contaminants that are on site are a huge concern for people. So people are they're looking for answers. They are looking to set a community meeting up in the near future in which they'll be inviting representatives from all levels of government. I was there for the first few. My question to the Minister, can he commit that the environment staff could attend that meeting for them so they could provide an update from the provincial perspective in the reporting that the department has done?
Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. So to the last part of that question, absolutely. I'll ensure that staff from the Sydney office are present at that meeting. Mr. Speaker, Imperial has a lot of work to do, and under the contaminated site regulations, they have to give us their remediation plan, and I will ensure staff holds them accountable to that remediation plan. And we certainly expect Imperial to be open and transparent in their communications, and that communication in a timely manner. I also want members of that community to know that my department will ensure that the contaminated site regulations are enforced, will ensure that the community is updated, and will also ensure that the larger members in the community of CBRM are updated as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Cumberland North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Often when a constituent comes to one of us as an MLA, it's often because they're in a desperate situation. And Bonnie Petton is in that situation right now, Mr. Speaker, where she literally, physically has no voice, and she has asked me to be her voice. And today I'm here in the legislature to beg for her. She is dying. She wants to die at home. And just yesterday, she received word that she will not receive the nursing care in her home that she wants. Everyone deserves to die with dignity, Mr. Speaker. So today I ask for the government to respond and grant Bonnie her dying wish. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister for Seniors and Long-Term Care.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. I'm certainly happy to speak with the member afterwards. I don't have any details on this, so I'd be more than happy to speak with her afterwards.
The honourable member for Cumberland North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've spoke about Bonnie before during a member statement and did send a letter, and the minister and I have spoken about this personally about 3 weeks ago. I was hopeful that Bonnie would be granted her dying wish, but as I mentioned just yesterday, she was told her care team met with her and gave her the very sad news that she will not be able to die at home. She does not have much time left, and Mr. Speaker, over the last probably month, she's been communicating to me. All she had left was a little bit of movement in her thumbs, and it would take her an hour just to send a message that was probably one sentence long, but now she can't even do that, Mr. Speaker. So I beg on behalf of Bonnie Petton to grant her wish to allow her to die at home. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister for Seniors and Long-Term Care.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. There's been a lot of discussions in this legislature about how much home care someone needs to be able to stay living. At some point, people need 24-hour day care, and that's why we do need additional levels of care. I don't know the specifics of this case, but I'd be certainly happy to speak to the member afterwards.
The Honourable Member for Halifax-Chebucto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Premier. No doubt the Premier is aware of the circumstances of the residents in the extended living units of Drumlin Hills Seniors Home in Bridgewater, that the home there has had a change in ownership, and the new owner is discontinuing the provision of assisted living in the building. And this is happening at a time when there is, of course, the severe shortage of appropriate housing alternatives in the South Shore. So I want to ask the Premier, what is the government doing for the seniors at Drumlin Hills who are losing their homes?
The Honourable Minister for Seniors and Long-Term Care.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. And I think it's really clear, important to be clear of the different levels of care. There's apartment buildings, and then there are unlicensed 24-hour day care facilities that private people set up, and then there are the publicly funded licensed residential care and long-term care facilities. The one we're talking about in Drumlin Hill is an apartment. It is an apartment that a landlord was offering a meal program and other things, and we have heard reports that the new owner is changing the what was offered under the lease. And so we would encourage all members who are living in that facility, if they have concerns about the change in the lease of this private apartment, that they reach out to the tenancy board. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Halifax-Chebucto.
It is true, Mr. Speaker, that the residents at Drumlin Hills enhanced living units, they range in age from their 70s to a couple who are over 100. And in Bridgewater, there is a group of concerned residents, including quite a number of clergy, who have come together to support them out of a deep concern that some of these people could very well end up homeless. So I want to ask the Premier, does he recognize that that is a realistic concern and that the government has a responsibility to address it?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I certainly appreciate the member opposite bringing this question forward, and I certainly empathize with the residents being impacted by this change. Mr. Speaker, when a new landlord assumes the responsibility or the ownership of that property, they assume also the responsibility of the existing leases. Mr. Speaker, when a tenant disagrees with the decision of their landlord, Mr. Speaker, I certainly encourage them to reach out to the tenancy board and submit an application. And Mr. Speaker, I'd certainly appreciate if the members, if they were willing to help out with that process as well. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Atlantic.
Mr. Speaker, as the Minister of Natural Resources aware, HRM decommissioned the fire station in Sambro. HRM has remediated the land and brought it back to its original state. The local community of Sambro has asked that when the land is transferred back to the province, it be signed over to the community so they can build a community centre. I've spoken to HRM and I've been told that they did their work and they are just waiting on sign-off from the province. Can the minister tell me if the land has been transferred back to the province and when it can be transferred over to the community of Sambro?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources and Renewables.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member opposite for the question. And just to update the member, the lease was released by HRM last summer. That land has been granted back to the Crown, if you will. But to date, there's been no application from any community group, but we'd certainly entertain any application, as we do for any Crown lands throughout the province, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Atlantic.
I want to thank the Minister for answering and for listening to the concerns. The cost of inflation is driving construction costs through the roof. Mr. Speaker, I spoke to the Minister's Department and was told that the process from the province side could take years. The longer it takes, the higher the price for the community to build the community centre. Can the Minister promise the community that this will be done promptly so that the community can control construction costs and get the community centre they deserve? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources and Renewables.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank the member member Ops for the question. Quite right. When I took the seat, some of the applications do take a long time, and that's one of the things that this government are trying to do is speedway things, remove red tape, and further the process. What I'll say to the member opposite is I look forward to having the application. That's the timely thing, to get the application in so we can move in a timely manner. And if the application does come, as I said, we'll look at that application as we do with any Crown land application.
The honourable member for Fairview Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Education and Early Childhood Education. We've just been informed that the Annapolis Valley Regional Centre for Education intends to immediately hire additional teachers to perform teacher duties while NSGEU workers are on strike, and I'll table a memo that was sent to these teachers. My question for the Minister is, was she aware that strike breakers were going to be brought in?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I haven't seen the document that the member opposite has tabled. I look forward to taking a look at it. I can say that strikes are disruptive, and we sympathize very much with...
Oh, my.
Strikes
Order,
are disruptive.
Please. Order, please.
And they're meant to be that way.
Order, please. Ask that the members please try to control their talk for a little while. The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. They are meant to be that. That's okay. We respect that they are part of the collective bargaining process. And what the education system, what the region is focused on right now through the course of this is to support families and students and staff to continue to support education in the system. So we know that there are supports that are being provided to pre-primary programs. We know that there are supports that are being provided to individual students. And the region is doing what they can to support families through this situation.
Fairview Clayton Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for a minister in a government that continued to espouse that they support fair and collective bargaining, hiring teachers at teacher wages to replace striking ECEs is not respecting fair and collective bargaining. Rather than getting back to the table, the government is trying to hire teachers. There was also said that parents were welcome to come in to do the work with the kids as well. So again, if the minister is not aware of this currently, I would implore her to become aware and to do something to make this not a reality. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'm just seeing this document, which is from an organization that is not actually the region, so I will follow up on this after the fact. But I am encouraged, and we should all be encouraged that the parties are back at the table today. What we've said all along is we encourage the parties to get back to the table, to negotiate, to come to a negotiated agreement through the collective bargaining process, and we're hopeful that that resolution will be soon. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Northside Westmount.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this month marks the one-year anniversary of the Collaborative Care Centre opening in North Sydney, and all reports are that things are going very well in that facility, and people are getting appointments and getting through. My question for the Minister of Health is, where are we in the Northside redevelopment project, and are things on time and on budget? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the member opposite for raising this question. The Northside Health Centre is one of the important pillars of the Cape Breton redevelopment project, including also the new Waterford Community Hub, the Glace Bay Hospital expansion, as well as the work at the Cape Breton Regional Hospital, including the cardiac catheterization unit that our government announced. Very, very proud. I say, Mr. Speaker, we're certainly understanding that the global economic climate is impacting all infrastructure projects, but we're certainly working on those challenges, Mr. Speaker, and we're continuously looking at the progress that's being made on the member's particular project in his constituency, understanding the importance for his region and all of Cape Breton. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Northside Westmount.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So just thank the Minister for that answer, but I just want to confirm that project is still on the books and is not delayed for the residents of Northside Westmount. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Things are on track as far as I know, and looking very much forward to touring the Cape Breton region, part of the redevelopment projects after the House rises, because I hear that steel's going up and dust is in the air, and perhaps we'll see the member there. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Centre, Whitney Pear.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Community Services. Yesterday it was reported that disability advocate Vicky Levesque would finally be moving out of her nursing home and into community-based living. Levesque has advocated for years for the deinstitutionalization of Nova Scotians living with disabilities. In June this year, the minister stated, quote, everyone should be able to participate in our communities without barriers. However, this sentiment is not the reality in our province, and recent reports show that over 800 individuals are on the wait list for community-based living. Mr. Speaker, when will everyone on this wait list receive the good news?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And first of all, I'm really excited for Vicky and her other roommates that they will be joining soon. They are the first of a pilot project that we're all very excited about. We also will be having probably about 25 others will be moving into independent living as well. And we need to keep up this momentum. It's really going well. The relationship and partnerships are going really well, and I just want the opposition to know I'm very committed to this. It will never go as fast as any of us want it, but we certainly are going as fast as we can, and we're working collectively together. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Cape Breton Centre, Whitney Pear.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate that answer from the minister. People like Vic have been fighting for years for the right to live in their communities. A department spokesperson told the media that, quote, the goal over time is to close all institutionalized residential settings and move people into community, end quote. However, this government will not commit to any timelines for this. Mr. Speaker, during the election, the Conservatives committed to completing the recommendations of the Disability Rights Roadmap by the end of their first term. Is the government still committed to this goal?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
This government is deeply committed to moving individuals out of large institutions into small options homes and independent living. We know this is exactly what they've been requesting for decades. We are committed to working together. Our talks and our discussions are going very well. We're looking at a remedy that might be able to move faster, but we're doing that together. We are committed. We continue to make those investments. In this last budget, we put $34 million towards it, and we'll keep making those commitments.
The Honourable Member for Cole Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week I had the opportunity to attend a senior social event in Cole Harbour. Many seniors I've talked to were concerned about the cost of living in crisis. They are worried about paying their home heating bill, putting food on their table, and prescriptions. My question is for the Speaker, for the Minister of Seniors. What are other resources or funding are you going to commit to seniors who currently don't qualify for the seniors grant?
The Honourable Minister for Seniors and Long-Term Care.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. So we are doing, as the Premier has outlined, targeted and sustainable investments. So the Seniors Care Grant was the very first action that our department took. And there are a number of people who are eligible for that grant. There are also home heating grants.
Please. The time for oral questions by members to ministers has expired. I recognize the Honourable Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that you do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself in the Committee and the whole House on bills.
Will resolve in the Committee of the whole House. Will take a recess until the committee gets set up.
Committee of Whole House on Bills will come to order. I recognize the Honourable Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would you please call Bill 219, Gaming Control Act, and Act to amend?
Bill number 219, Chapter 4 of the Acts of 1994-95, the Gaming Control Act. I'll recognize the clerk.
Bill 219 was referred to the House by the Standing Committee on Law Amendments on November 1st, 2022 without amendments and contains 12 clauses.
Shall Clause 1 carry? Carry. Shall the remaining clauses 2 to 12 carry? Carry. Shall the title carry? Carry. Shall the bill carry? Carry. Sorry, the bill is carried. The bill is carried. I recognize the Deputy Government House Leader. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would you please call Bill 228, Public Utilities Act, an act to amend respecting efficiency Nova Scotia?
Bill number 228, 1989, the Public Utilities Act, respecting efficiency Nova Scotia. I recognize the clerk.
Bill 228 was referred to the House by the Standing Committee on Law Amendments on November 1st, 2022 without amendments and contains 14 clauses.
Shall Clause 1 carry? Carry. Shall the remaining clauses 2 to 14 carry? Carry. Shall the title carry? Carry. Shall the bill carry? Carry. The bill is carried. I recognize the Honourable... Oh, so... Nope. No, sorry. Oh. I recognize the Honourable Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would you please call Bill number 223, Municipal Finance Corporation Dissolution Act?
Bill number 223, the act to dissolve the Municipal Finance Corporation was referred to the House by the Standing Committee on... so I recognize the clerk.
Bill 223 was referred to the House by the Standing Committee on Law Amendments on November 1st, 2022 without amendments and contains 34 clauses.
Shall Clause 1 carry? Carry. Shall the remaining clauses 2 to 34 carry? Carry. Shall the title carry? Carry. Shall the bill carry? Carry. The bill is carried. I recognize the Honourable Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would you please call Bill number 227, Financial Measures Act, File 2022 Act?
Bill 227, an act representing certain financial measures. I recognize the clerk.
Bill 227 was referred to the House by the Standing Committee on Law Amendments on November 1st, 2022 without amendments and contains 4 clauses.
Shall Clause 1 carry? Carry. Shall the remaining clauses 2 to 4 carry? Carry. Shall the title carry? Carry. Sorry. Apologies. I recognize the Honourable Member, or the member for Halifax-Shabukto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In second reading about this bill, my friend, the member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island, made, I thought, the very good point that it is quite irregular to have major budget measures of this proportion brought forward separately from the general budget. And she had a number of examples to explain about the rarity of this. She inquired of the government to provide an explanation to this effect. I think this is a reasonable question, and in the debate to this point, it's a question that has not been answered. It is true that when a budget measure of this sort is brought in the context of the entirety of a budget's proposal, the revenue that is to be foregone by a tax measure of this sort can be evaluated and measured in comparison to the government's other projections about other sources of revenue, other potential expenses and so on. And the House is able to judge that measure in that more holistic way, as is everybody else. That's why these kinds of measures typically are brought forward together in a budget, because in fact they speak as financial measures about the program of the government, the priorities of the government as a whole. So I think this is an important concern that has not been addressed. And it is to be hoped that in the course of the debate, I would think it would be a good opportunity here at Committee of the Whole that the government would provide a more complete explanation about this than they have to this point. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Cumberland North.
Madam Speaker, I just want to add a couple comments to the bill. I think that this bill is, regardless of when it's brought forward, it's very encouraging to see. Many people don't have the privilege of conception easily, and it can cost a lot of money for people to have a family. Most recently, a family that just gave birth, it cost them $100,000. $100,000 for them to have a child of their own. So I think that this piece of legislation is very encouraging to see and will benefit a lot of Nova Scotians. Thank you.
Shall the title carry? Carry. Shall the bill carry? Carry. The bill is carried. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader, Deputy House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would you please call Bill 224, Perennial Food and Agriculture Corporation Act?
Bill 224, an act representing Perennial Food and Agricultural Corporation. I recognize the clerk.
Bill 224 was referred to the House by the Standing Committee on Law Amendments on November 1st, 2022, without amendments, and contains 40 clauses.
Clause 1. I recognize the member from Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island.
Thank you. I wanted to rise. I think we've talked a bit about some of our concerns about this bill previously, and they relate to governance, a lack of rationale for this move, governance in terms of consolidating power under the decision-making of a minister. And I wanted to share in the House, actually, on behalf of the Nova Scotia Federation of Agriculture, the letter that they tabled, because I think it's really important for all of us to consider what they say about this initiative. And I will say it was particularly striking to me because there are a number of important stakeholders in the sector, but I would say that NSFA is a really important stakeholder, my opinion is that we should be working in partnership and in collaboration with stakeholders as we go forward on policy changes and program changes, and that was not done with this. So I will pick up on in the third paragraph of the letter. Since this bill has been introduced, the NSFA have been hearing from several industry partners about their concerns regarding the proposed legislation. The lack of consultation with the industry and the significant shift in organizational structure leaves us concerned about future engagements and priorities of the organization. There are a number of areas we would like to highlight. With the shift to an advisory board, the industry will no longer be leading the priorities of the organization. It is essential that the industry lead the strategic direction and mandate of Perennia. Industry organizations and farmers need to be assured that the work of agricultural extension is led by the subject experts themselves, those with direct experience and expertise, that decisions pertaining to the sector impacts. And I think, just reiterating conversations that I've had with the folks at NSFA and other stakeholder groups, they really value the agricultural extension and applied research that they've had access to, and it's been perceived as a really responsive, predictable, quick service that they could access that impacts what they do almost immediately on an annual basis. So this part was really important, and they're worried that they're going to lose their voice in setting the priorities for the organization. Their second point, recruitment and retention of qualified specialists is key to the success of the extension and applied research mandates of the organization. It is unclear whether strategic recruitment and retention strategies will be in alignment with the proposed hierarchical structure. And so, again, this organization has been working really well. I mean, before it gets pulled down, I would encourage folks to go have a look at their website for the impressive types of information and work that they do. Their financial statements are there for all to look at. And it's largely been a self-sustaining organization, and it's hard to understand actually how it's going to work in its new entity and its new organization. And I think what NSFA here is emphasizing within that is their concern about what's happening to folks who have been employees or consultants of Perennia and how they will work with this being under the direct purview of the minister and with the need to work more tightly with the structures inherent in public service employment. Their third point, successful extension and applied research requires strategic partnership with industry stakeholders. It is essential that Perennia grow these strategic partnerships to ensure the continued development of the industry. And again, I think it's very concerning that here we have the major agricultural stakeholder group that represents, and just let me find, just under 2,000 registered farm businesses in Nova Scotia. And yet they had no idea this was coming forward. They weren't consulted. There was actually no clear idea why this is being done. The minister has not chosen to share the rationale, the research, the analysis about why this proposed change. And you know, I think 2,000 members of NSFA were caught off guard with this proposal. With the broad mandate of the advisory board, it's important that these do not duplicate the efforts or compete with existing advisory boards, such as the Meat Inspection Board, the Livestock Health Services Board. Additionally, many agencies, boards, and commissions have had vacancies for several years, which has impacted their ability to fulfill their mandates. And so priority must be placed on recruiting board members for all agency boards and commission. And I will say that anytime that I meet with a stakeholder group in the agriculture sector, the gaps of appointments is of serious concern. It has been since September 2021. People have repeated to me as recently as a couple weeks ago. So you can see that the NSFA and its members are concerned about how, in fact, they can anticipate supporting the industry going forward. Perhaps most important, I'll go back to the letter. Perhaps most importantly, the message we wish to make clear is the essential need for the government of Nova Scotia and the Department of Agriculture specifically to engage meaningfully, consistently, and authentically with industry and the farm families through NSFA and commodity organizations. Again, this is the major stakeholder in the agriculture sector who was not engaged, didn't call for this, this wasn't on their radar, and we have had no rationale presented for why this change is being proposed. And they go on to say an advisory board cannot replace this necessary action. More from the letter. Further, we must assert that this legislation cannot impact Perennia's ability to maintain and grow its partnerships and relationships with stakeholders. That impact, intentional or not, would effectively fracture the strong relationship that the industry has built with our partners. And they end by saying, we strongly believe in the importance of accountability and transparency through effective governance practices and respectfully request that the board mandate a strategic direction of Prenia be industry-led. So with that, I would invite the minister to respond to this and to offer up perhaps any amendments that can be made to actually respond to the 2,000 members of the Nova Scotia Federation of Agriculture. Thank you.
Shall Clause 1 carry? Carry. Shall the remaining clauses 2 to 40 carry? Carry. Shall the title carry? Carry. Shall the bill carry? Carry. The bill is carried. I'd like to recognize the Deputy House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nice to recognize you up there. I move that you call, would you please call Bill 212, Public Utilities Act, an act to amend?
Bill 212, I recognize the clerk.
Bill 212 was referred to the House by the Standing Committee on Law Amendments on November 1st, 2022, with certain amendments and contains 5 clauses.
Just hold on. So do I say this? Do I still say this? Okay. I understand this bill was amended by the Committee of Law Amendments, and unless this committee wishes to proceed immediately with consideration of the clauses, I would ask the clerk to explain how the bill has been amended. The clerk.
Bill 212 was amended at the Standing Committee on Law Amendments on page 1, clause 3, proposed clause 64A, subsection 3A, clause B, by deleting distributed. The clause as written would have limited revenue generated from a net rate increase to being used to improve the reliability of distribution service to ratepayers. The amendment removed the distribution qualifier, allowing revenue to be used to improve the reliability of service generally to ratepayers.
For the benefit of this committee, I want to explain that as we consider this bill and any other bill that may be called at this meeting, we will be considering the bill in the form containing the amendments already made by the Committee of Law Amendments. If I am asking this committee if a clause carries as amended, I will referring to amendments that we will have been moved during our debate in this committee. Is that agreed? It is agreed. If any honorable member wishes to propose a change to any of the amendments made by the Committee on Law Amendments, the proper procedure is to move a new amendment during debate on the clause as we come to it in our debate here on the clauses of the bill. Do I say this? Okay. Clause 1. I recognize Member of Dartmouth South.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move an amendment, and I would draw the members' attention to CWHB NDP 1. I'm not sure if folks have that yet. So could I ask for just a 2-minute recess while people get the paper? They don't have it.
You don't have one?
You don't want people scattering to the winds? You don't want people scattering to the winds?
I recognize the honourable member from Dartmouth South.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. Mixed Chair, I'd like to move an amendment and then I'll speak to it briefly. So I will draw the member's attention to CWHP NDP 1. Page 1 after clause 1, the following clause. 2, chapter 380 is further amended by adding immediately after section 34A the following section. 34B1, in this section, A, Amera means Amera Incorporated. B, leader of a recognized party means a leader of a recognized party as defined in the House of Assembly Act. C, task force means the task force appointed under this section. 2, the Governor and Council, after consultation with each leader of a recognized party, the chair of the board, and Amira shall appoint by June 30th, 2023, a task force comprised of up to 6 members to study bringing Nova Scotia Power back into public ownership. 3, the task force shall A, consider the terms of the 1992 privatization and determine whether an appropriate financial arrangement was made at that time. B, examine advantages and disadvantages of bringing back into public ownership the whole or any parts of Nova Scotia Power. C, advise on what financial models would be appropriate to bring back into public ownership the whole or any parts of Nova Scotia Power, including an appropriate price to be paid for shares or assets. D, bear in mind in all of its work current public policy regarding sustainability and climate change. E, include consideration of the appropriate model of ownership of the municipal electricity utilities and taxation arrangements of Nova Scotia Power, so far as they affect all municipalities. And F, include consideration of possible future development of electricity generation through renewables, including offshore wind, wave energy, and tidal power. 4, the task force shall hear public hearings. 5, Nova Scotia Power Incorporated and Amera shall cooperate fully with the task force and make available to it all documents and the testimony of any employee or officer required by it. 6, the task force shall report its findings to the Governor and Council by March 15th, 2024. 7, the Premier or another member of the Executive Council shall table the report in the House of Assembly within 15 days of its receipt by the Governor and Council, or where the House is not then sitting, file it with the Clerk of the House. I will speak briefly to this, Mixed Chair. We brought this as a piece of legislation, and this essentially enables a study to be done. So what we know right now, the reason for this bill is that it is widely perceived that Nova Scotians are not getting a good deal. that we have a situation where we have a company that is successful, that makes a lot of profit, that has large executive compensation packages, whose shareholders do really well, and then we have the million people of our province who almost uniformly would agree that our power bills are just too high. And so then the question is, what do we do about it? And we have introduced a slate of legislative proposals that we think would address this. So we've talked about changing the regulatory system. We've talked about protection for folks who live in energy poverty, who can't really afford those power bills. One of the other things that we think it's important to look at is the ownership structure of Nova Scotia Power. I've had lots of conversations about this, but this really came to the fore when this bill was introduced, and there was an article in which Scott Balfour, the CEO of Emera, there's an article in All Nova Scotia from October 20th that says Emera Incorporated says the Tim Houston government's plan to seize control of the regulatory processes at the 11th hour and cap power rates are forcing it to contemplate its future in Nova Scotia. And I'll table that. And so what that, whether or not that's real, we've talked about that. Like, is that a real thing? Would Emera leave? Would Nova Scotia Power leave? Well, based on those kinds of comments, we need to at least contemplate that. And so the reality is, as we've said many times on the floor of this House, power is an essential service here in Nova Scotia. We can't really survive without it. I suspect that even the hardiest among us who are living in the woods have some way of generating some amount of power for themselves, because you can't really survive in our climate without it. And so we have a power monopoly here, and that power monopoly has been shaken by the introduction of this bill. And so we owe it to Nova Scotians to discuss what the alternatives might be. And we also owe it to Nova Scotians to provide some transparent information about the structure of our regulatory system. And even though that, lots of people might find that boring, I think everybody would say that it's relevant, and what kind of deal we're getting. And I think, without going into too many details, I think it's really important to note that we have Nova Scotia Power as a company has a monopoly on our power generation, and we all know that that's still predominantly coal, but they also own our grid. And we've talked a lot about Hurricane Fiona in this House, and that grid is sort of like the mystery actor at the center of the drama, actually, because that grid created so many problems, right? And when I was driving through New Waterford and Dominion, like 4 or 5 days after the storm, you would just see power lines toppled upon each other and wires through the streets, and I think we all agree that we need a more resilient grid, but resiliency is only one aspect of the grid. The other really important aspect, which actually has featured in this general rate application from Nova Scotia Power, is who gets access to the grid and what do they pay for it. And so Nova Scotia Power, as I've said many times, makes money by selling power, right? They sell power, we pay for power, they make money, and then, with that income, they presumably maintain the grid and generate the power and do all the things we need. But we also need to ensure that we are greening our grid. And right now, with the rate structure that we have with Nova Scotia Power, if we use less power, they make less money. And so introducing renewables like solar and wind to the grid, even cell service, which is a huge issue still across our province. Like, I've been talking about this for 5.5 years, and there are still so many parts of Nova Scotia that don't have cell service. Well, the cost of cell phone providers using Nova Scotia Power poles can be punitive. That's a part of that conversation. And so I think there is a real conversation of who should own that grid. I'm not really so convinced that we need to own a bunch of coal-fired power plants, since that's not what we want. But if we are going to be potentially left in a vacuum, if Nova Scotia Power does ever say now or in the future, we don't want to provide power to Nova Scotians anymore, well then what are we going to do? And so we need to understand what our options are, and this is one of our options. So this isn't binding anybody to anything. This isn't a buyout plan for Nova Scotia Power shareholders. This is saying we're going to spend some time with some experts, and we're going to understand the financial compact we have with the company that has a power monopoly and what other options are out there. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mixed Chair.
Okay. Shall Amendment NDP 1 carry? Carry. The amendment is defeated. I recognize the honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you very much, Mixed Chair, and I would like to ask the members to turn their attention to NDP change sheet number 2. And I will propose the following amendment. Page 1, add after clause 1 the following clause. 2, chapter 380 is further revised by adding immediately after section 52A the following section. 52A 1. The minister shall strike a commission to create a performance-based regulation framework for Nova Scotia Power Incorporated within 1 year of the coming into force of this section. 2, the performance-based regulation framework must require the board to A, remove disincentives from existing regulatory systems that discourage customer renewable energy generation and energy efficiency, and B, determine Nova Scotia Power Incorporated's annual rate of return according to a set of performance-based incentive mechanisms related to, but not limited to, outcomes respecting 1, decarbonization, 2, reliability, 3, customer satisfaction, 4, citizen and community participation in the production of renewable power generation, 5, energy efficiency, 6, a just transition to support workers and their communities in the transition to a low-carbon economy, 7, reduction in energy poverty, and 8, lowering customers' power bills, and then renumbering accordingly. So, Madam Chair, this is, just to catch you up here, this is an amendment that would allow for performance-based regulation of Nova Scotia Power. This essentially is, in addition to what this bill is doing, which we know is to cap rates, it's to directly limit profit and rate increase for Nova Scotia Power. This would, instead of unilaterally restricting profit, the amendment would seek to regulate it by tying it to various performance standards and policy objectives. So we know that there are ways to regulate Nova Scotia Power and to help Nova Scotia Power achieve what we as Nova Scotians need it to achieve. That is, to keep reasonable rates on of our power and make sure that Nova Scotians have low power bills, but also to transition to a no carbon production of energy and electricity. It's really difficult for Nova Scotia Power to do those things. Well, we've heard in the UARB hearings the challenges that Nova Scotia Power has. But if we are to make sure that this happens, that people can maintain lower rates and lower bills, and also we can green our grid and have a reliable energy system, then we need to change the rules about how Nova Scotia can be regulated. And so this would essentially do that. While it may have a similar effect to profit restrictions, this amendment would also provide incentive to the company to meet targets like climate goals or grid reliability. So I'll just remind people what we're talking about. We're talking about decarbonization, reliability, customer satisfaction, citizen and community participation in the production of renewable power generation, energy efficiency, a just transition, reduction in energy poverty, and therefore, well, and in the same vein, lowering customers' power bills. So it only makes sense to us that we would add this amendment. This is not changing the thrust, the actual thrust of the bill, but it would be improving the legislation and be improving how we can manage into the future the way that we're going to govern Nova Scotia Power, and given that we're not doing a review of ownership, and hopefully be able to achieve our climate goals and make sure power is affordable for Nova Scotians.
Okay. Shall the amendment carry? No. Shall Clause 1 carry? Carry. Shall Clauses 2 to 4 carry? Carry. Clause 5? Carry. I recognize the member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to direct the member's attention to change sheet NDP 3. I'll give you a moment to get that in front of you.
Thank you.
So I know you're sitting on the edge of your seats. Page 2. Okay, I would like to propose the following amendment. Page 2, add after Clause 5 the following clause. 6. Section 67 of Chapter 380 is amended by adding immediately after subsection 2 the following subsection. 3. Notwithstanding subsections 1 and 2, the board may create a program to address rate affordability for lower income residential customers, with the goals of the program including, but not limited to, A, no lower income residential customer paying more than 6% of their customer's household income on home energy. B, no lower income residential customer losing power due to an inability to pay tolls, rates, or charges. C, payment plans for amounts in arrears being affordable. And D, lower income residential customers whose energy consumption exceeds 6% of their household income being offered options for deep retrofits and other measures to bring home energy costs below 6% of household income. So, Madam Chair, we have heard from this government that affordability is number one, as a number one priority for this government. We know that people in Nova Scotia, many of our constituents are struggling to make ends meet, and power rates are part of that. This bill, Bill 212, will cap power rates for 2 years. But what happens after that? We need to be thinking about this kind of a program in perpetuity for our ratepayers. So, we brought this forward following statements from the Affordable Energy Coalition and law amendments. And actually, I think I would say, too, personally, in my office, Madam Chair, we help an awful lot of people navigate through Nova Scotia Power's arrears programs. We know that there's an awful lot of people in Dartmouth North and everywhere, like I said, living in energy poverty, unable to pay their bills, facing getting their power cut off, and it's just unsustainable. So we're at a turning point in our province's electricity sector, as our province and utilities work to get off coal by 2030. We know that long-term sustainable energy production will be more affordable for all Nova Scotians, especially low-income ratepayers. We just need to get there, and until we get there, we know that large upfront costs combined with worldwide high energy costs and rising inflation are making that difficult. So low-income ratepayers need protection. To quote Brian Gifford of the Affordable Energy Coalition at Law Amendments, he said, "If now is not the time to create a regulated low-income rate relief program, when will there ever be a time?" Similar amendments to this were voted down at law amendments, but we believe it warrants a greater discussion. And I truly invite members from the other side to engage in this discussion. This is nothing that will threaten the integrity of the bill, but it will, and we've heard this from Nova Scotia Power, we've heard it from members of the government before, that they are interested in figuring out solutions for low-income ratepayers. This is the way to get at that. This proposal would create a program to cap rates to 6% of household income, which we know is the definition of energy poverty. If someone's paying more than 6%, they are in energy poverty. So, Madam Chair, I present that amendment to the House. I urge the government to take a look, maybe even take a recess. Think about it. Talk amongst yourselves. Do the right thing for Nova Scotians and make sure this happens. Thank you.
Shall the amendment carry? No. Clause 5. I recognize the member for Halifax Needham. Oh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to know if I could beg leave to make an introduction.
Oh, I didn't say that. Oh, of course. Yes, of course. Sorry.
Thank you. I will be very quick and brief, and I think this is a nice little segue into just taking a breather. I would like to draw everyone's attention to the West Gallery. I would like to introduce Deacon Thornton Williams and his wife, Mrs. Williams, both from my church, my home church, New Horizons. And I want to welcome you both to be here today, and I thank you for your love and support.
Thank you to Deacon Williams and Miss Williams. It's great to see you. Look familiar. So lovely to have you here in the legislature, and thank you for showing up. And I'm going to do an extended introduction. If there's other folks who have been upstairs who were coming to support some of your MLAs here, I also want to extend a thank you to you all. It is because of you all that we continue to do this in this House. So thank you, and I appreciate it. I recognize the member for Dartmouth North.
Me again, Madam Chair. I would like to introduce a fourth amendment, and I'd ask the members to refer to NDP change sheet 4. And I will move the following amendment. Page 1, after clause 5, the following clause. 6. Chapter 380 is further amended by adding immediately after section 92 the following section. 92A1, where the Governor and Council directs or the Board on its own motion decides, the Board shall appoint a person to act as a sustainability advocate in a hearing before the Board. 2, a sustainability advocate appointed pursuant to subsection 1. A, shall participate in all aspects of the hearing before the Board and represent the interest of residential consumers as a full intervener with power to enter into settlement agreements with other parties, and B, has all the powers and authorities necessary to carry out the duties of a sustainability advocate pursuant to this section. 3, the Board may fix fees and expenses of a sustainability advocate in performing the function and duties of a sustainability advocate pursuant to this section. 4, the fees and expenses referred to in subsection 3A shall be paid to the Board by the applicant or applicants in such proportion as determined by the Board, and B, may include the cost of retaining experts and legal counsel to provide the sustainability advocate with advice, including testimony on technical and legal matters. 5, the Board may make rules respecting practice and procedure, scope of work, fees and expenses, and other matters respecting a sustainability advocate appointed pursuant to section 1. 6, the Governor and Council may make regulations respecting the qualifications and experience of a sustainability advocate. And then 7, section 93 of chapter 380 is repealed and the following section substituted. 93, the same person must not be appointed to more than one of the positions referred to in sections 91, 92, and 92A. So, Madam Chair, this amendment refers to the creation of a position for a sustainability advocate. Following law amendments, it became clear that enforcing the 2030 climate goals was going to be a challenge for government. The CEO of Nova Scotia Power, Peter Gregg, explicitly said that the utility that the utility can't or won't meet 2030 goals in light of this bill. It's more important than ever to have these discussions with Nova Scotia Power, especially in their regulation before the Utility and Review Board, and, you know, especially before that happens and not at the end of that process. This amendment will make sure that sustainability is included in all discussions. It will currently at the table we have a consumer advocate and small business advocate. A sustainability advocate is another important factor to be considered and an important voice to be heard. This advocate will help hold Nova Scotia Power accountable to legislated climate targets during this period of transition. And I'll just lastly add that, you know, I think as someone who was an intervener at the UARB hearings, it was profoundly important to hear from the small business advocate and the consumer advocate. They brought excellent insight into the process of the application, and I think we do need to have someone who is solely thinking, excuse me, about sustainability. We have a target. We have a legislated law target of being off coal by 2030. And if Nova Scotia Power is saying that because of this bill, that can't happen, that we need somebody on the inside who is advocating for that goal, and it can't be the minister just yelling from the outside. So I urge the government to accept this amendment.
For clarity, I'll just recognize that the last amendment was defeated. And so shall this amendment carry? No. The amendment has been defeated. Shall clause 5 carry? Carry. Shall the title carry? Carry. Shall the bill carry? Carry. The bill is carried. I recognize the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would you please call Bill 214, Invest Nova Scotia Act?
Bill 214, an act to establish Invest Nova Scotia. I recognize the clerk.
Bill 214 was referred to the House by the Standing Committee on Law Amendments on November 1st, 2022, without amendments, and contains 47 clauses.
Clause 1. I recognize the member for Halifax Citadel Sable Island.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to rise to speak to this bill. I've spoken about my concerns with this bill previously, and I will say that thus far have not received information from the minister or the government that satisfies my concerns. In fact, I think more than that, there's been sort of a revelation of a great number of misconceptions of the minister and the government in terms of governance structures, ministerial accountability, and stakeholder engagement. So one of the things, and I will bring forward those concerns again during third reading, but one of the things I wanted to bring forward today actually was, again, some voices from Law Amendments Committee, which is where we're supposed to be hearing from stakeholders. And I want to share some excerpts from the letter and presentation from the Halifax Chamber of Commerce. So there's some summary, and then in the third paragraph, I'll pick up their comments. The concern we have is not with the consolidation of these organizations, although it would have been good to understand what efficiencies will be accomplished. Our issues with the system of governance and oversight proposed for these new organizations. And in this case, the President and CEO is talking both about the Invest Nova Scotia and Build Nova Scotia bills. Sections 23A of Bill 214 and 22A of Bill 216 respectively state that the advisory board shall report to the minister through the chief executive officer. This is not an example of a best practices model. The government seems to have some confusion about Crown corporations and their governance model. As recently as today, this past Monday, October 31st, as reported in all of Nova Scotia, the Premier was forced to defend the independence of Invest Nova Scotia's decisions, stating that decisions will lie with the CEO and staff. However, this CEO reports directly to the Minister of Economic Development. The structure proposed reflects the current administration's lack of awareness when it comes to the role and importance of good governance. And they go on to say the board of directors of a Crown corporation has the legal responsibilities to act in the best interests of the corporation and to exercise due care and diligence. A board is expected to provide strategic advice to management and oversee the activities of the corporation. While an advisory board can provide valuable assistance to a company, the major difference lies in its fiduciary responsibilities. The fiduciary obligation is much higher in a board of directors than an advisory board. So I think that, we still struggle with a lack of information and transparency with regards to this proposed bill. We still don't understand what happened in the review of Crown corporations. We haven't been privy to any of the analysis or information. As the author here states, perhaps there are efficiencies, as my colleague from Dartmouth South stated. Perhaps Novacor and the tasks of a Novacor and NSBI are well suited to be together. Nonetheless, we've not received any of that information, and I would really invite the minister to actually share the analytical framework and the results, so that we can be able in a better position to understand the implications of this change. But I do think it's also, again, part of this trend where things are consolidated to ministerial direction. I think this is actually, honestly, a really backwards move in terms of governance in this province. Over the years, Canadian Public Service, the Nova Scotia Public Service, has worked really hard to actually overcome a legacy of patronage and nepotism and to increase the clarity, transparency, and accountability of government. And all of these proposals put that backwards. I think it creates an uncertain regulatory and policy environment for businesses in this province. I think I honestly don't think the government or the minister quite understand the level of perceived and real liability that they're taking on with this role. And I think it's going to hinder and damage the good work that's already been done by NSBI and Novacor. I look forward to saying more in third reading, and with that, I'll take my seat.
Shall clause 1 carry? Carried. Carried. Shall the remaining clauses 2 to 47 carry? Carried. Carried. Shall the title carry? Carried. Shall the bill carry? Carried. The bill is carried. Wrong one. Thank you. I recognize the Deputy House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would you please call Bill number 215, Invest Nova Scotia Board Act, an act to amend?
So then do I say anything here? Bill 215, I recognize the clerk.
Bill 215 was referred to the House by the Standing Committee on Law Amendments on November 1st, 2022, without amendments, and contains 11 clauses.
Clause 1, shall clause 1 carry? Carry. Shall the remaining clauses 2 to 11 carry? Carry. Shall the title carry? Carry. Shall the bill carry? Carry. The bill is carried. I recognize the Deputy House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would you please call Bill 216, Build Nova Scotia Act?
I recognize the clerk.
Bill 216, an act to establish Build Nova Scotia, was referred to the House by the Standing Committee on Law Amendments on November 1st, 2022, without amendments, and contains 42 clauses.
Clause 1. Shall Clause 1 carry? Shall the remaining clauses 2 to 42 carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. I recognize the Deputy House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would you please call Bill 230, the Provincial Lichen Act?
I recognize the House Clerk.
Bill 230 was referred to the House by the Standing Committee on Law Amendments on November 1st, 2022, without amendments, and contains 2 clauses.
Thank you. Clause 1. Shall the clause carry? Clause 1 carry? Carry. Shall the remaining clauses 2 carry? Carry. Shall the title carry? Carry. Shall the bill carry? Carry. The bill is carried. I recognize the Honourable Deputy House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the committee do now rise and report business.
The motion is carried. The committee will now rise and report its business to the House.
Good job.
Order, please. I recognize the clerk.
The Committee of the Whole House on Bills has met and considered the following bills. Bills 214, 215, 216, 219, 223, 224, 227, 228, and 230 without amendments. And Bill 212, which was reported with certain amendments by the Law Amendments Committee to the Committee of the Whole House without further amendments. And the Chair has been instructed to recommend these bills to the favorable consideration of the House.
I recognize the Honourable Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that concludes government business for today. I move the House do now rise and meet again on Tuesday, November 8th between the hours of 1 and 6 p.m.
The motion is that the House rise to meet again on Tuesday, November 8th between the hours of 1 and 6 p.m. Would those in favour of the motion please indicate aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. We stand adjourned until Tuesday, November 8th.